Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. They say every town has a house like this, the one where curtains seem to move even when there's no breeze, where lights flicker when no one's home, where animals refuse to go near and kids dare each other to touch the doorknob. But what made this house different? What made it feared even by those who didn't believe in ghosts? Was that sometimes it spoke back. No one knew exactly when it started. Some said it had always been like that. Others whispered about a family that had vanished without a trace in the 1970s, leaving everything behind. Furniture, clothes, even a still, warm cup of coffee. The local paper didn't report on it. The police didn't investigate. But everyone remembered. The McCallan house stood at the end of Elridge Lane, behind a thick hedge of dead shrubs and a rusted wrought iron gate that always seemed to be locked wide, except when someone was foolish enough to try it. The air around it felt wrong, like the silence before a scream. And on the 1st of October, the same day every year, something inside that house would stir. Tessa was 19 when she moved into the town of Red Hollow. Her father had died of a heart attack earlier that summer, and her mother, crumbling from grief, decided a fresh start was what they needed. "It's just a sleepy little town," she'd said. "Nothing bad ever happens here." The kind of thing people say when they're trying to convince themselves more than anyone else. They found a small rental near the center of town. A house built in the 1940s, charming in a crooked, uneven kind of way. But from Tessa's window upstairs, she could see Elridge Lane, and at the very end of it, surrounded by fog that never seemed to lift, was the McCallan house. No one warned them. Not the landlord, not the neighbors, not the chatty girl at the diner who served them pie and sweet tea with a hollow smile. But everyone paused, just a beat too long, when they mentioned the street name. It started with dreams. The first night, Tessa dreamt of a girl with wet, tangled hair standing at the foot of her bed. The girl's mouth didn't move, but Tessa could hear her words like a whisper inside her skull, "Don't let it in." She woke up with blood beneath her fingernails and dirt on her sheets. She tried to tell her mother. "It's just stress," her mom had said. "You've been through a lot." And maybe she was right. Maybe grief did strange things to the mind. But it didn't explain the fact that their dog, Bowie, refused to go near the upstairs, or how the basement door, which they kept bolted shut, would be wide open every morning. Then came the knocking. At first, it was soft, so gentle Tessa thought she imagined it. Always 3 knocks. Always just after 3:00 a.m. She checked the front door, then the back. Nothing. She started leaving her phone on record overnight. The next morning, the file was there, 3 knocks, clear as day, followed by a long, wet dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across wood. Then silence. She didn't sleep that night. Tessa started noticing other things. The mirror in the bathroom always seemed foggy, no matter how often she wiped it. Faces in her photos that weren't there when she took them. Shadows moving behind closed doors. But what terrified her most was the way people looked at her in town, as if they knew. As if they were waiting. One evening, as she left the library just before closing, the old woman at the front desk grabbed her wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Stay away from Elridge," she whispered. "It doesn't just take people, it keeps them." Tessa pulled away, shaken, but when she turned to ask more, the woman was gone, vanished into the darkened aisles of books. A week later, she got curious. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, the weight of loss, the gnawing emptiness in her chest. But she needed to see it. She needed to know. The gate was open. She didn't remember opening it. One moment she stood before it, heart pounding. The next she was walking up the crooked stone path, weeds clawing at her ankles, air thick with the stench of rotting earth. The front door hung slightly ajar, as if the house had been expecting her. Inside, it was colder than it should have been. Her breath puffed out in mist. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, the color of old bones. A staircase loomed to her left, broken in places, and a chandelier hung above her, its crystals stained red. She stepped inside. The floor groaned beneath her weight. A breeze, there was no wind, blew past her, carrying with it the scent of mildew and something else. Coppery. Sharp. Blood. In the living room, the furniture was covered in dusty sheets. She pulled one back and found a child's rocking chair, still swaying. From the corner of her eye movement, she turned. Nothing. Then she heard it, a soft hum, like a lullaby sung off key, drifting from upstairs. Her skin prickled. Her body screamed to run. But something deeper, a pull she couldn't explain, kept her feet rooted. She climbed the stairs. Each step creaked louder than the last. The song grew clearer, but more twisted. Like a child imitating their mother, not quite getting the words right. At the top of the stairs was a hallway lined with closed doors. She reached for the first one. Locked. The second. Locked. The third creaked open on its own. It was a nursery. Paint peeled from the walls, once a cheerful yellow, now faded to sickly green. A mobile hung from the ceiling, spinning slowly, although the air was still. Toys lay scattered across the floor, some broken, some melted, as if caught in a fire that touched nothing else. On the crib was a single word, carved deep into the wood, FED. Then the lullaby stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Tessa turned, heart hammering. The door slammed shut behind her. She ran to it, yanking the knob. It wouldn't move. The window beside her showed only darkness, not night, something thicker, heavier, moving. In the reflection, a face. She spun around. The girl from her dream stood in the corner. Hair dripping, eyes black as coal, lips stitched shut with wire. She raised a hand and pointed. To the closet. No, Tessa whispered, but her legs moved anyway. The closet door creaked open, and inside was a staircase leading down, far deeper than the house should have allowed. She looked back. The girl was gone. The mobile spun wildly now, jangling like distant screams. With no other choice, she descended. The stairs twisted down in impossible directions. Walls grew tighter. The air thickened. Her flashlight flickered and died. She moved forward in darkness, guided only by the sound. Dripping water, the creak of chains, and breathing. Close. Too close. At the bottom was a door made of flesh. It pulsed, veins twitching beneath its surface. A heartbeat thudded from within, in time with her own. She touched it. It was warm. Slick, it opened. Inside was a room. A mirror lined the far wall. And in that mirror was not her reflection, but hundreds of her, all slightly different, all screaming, trapped. The girl was behind her again. This time she could speak. You saw it. Now it sees you. The mirror shattered. Tessa woke up in her bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. Birds chirped. Her sheets were clean. Her hands were clean. But the dirt was still under her nails. And on the wall, in wet, red letters, was the word she'd seen in the nursery, FED. The town felt different now. People stared longer. Whispered louder. Bowie wouldn't come near her. Her mother looked at her with a distant fear, like she couldn't quite place what had changed. But something had. Tessa tried to forget. She burned the clothes she'd worn that night. She deleted the recordings. She stopped sleeping. But the house was inside her now. Every mirror reflected more than just her. Every shadow whispered. And every night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., came the knocking, 3 times. Followed by the dragging, followed by her name, because something had followed her out. And it was hungry. For 3 nights in a row, Tessa didn't sleep. Not because she didn't try. She did, exhausted and desperate. But because every time her eyes drifted shut, she heard it. That same wet dragging noise just beyond her bedroom door. And then the whisper, not loud, not even spoken, but pulsing in her mind like a distant heartbeat. Tessa. She told herself it was stress, lack of sleep, leftover fear from the house. But when her mother knocked on her door the next morning and asked if she had been up pacing all night, Tessa knew she wasn't imagining it, because she hadn't left the bed, not once. By the fourth night, things escalated. The knock came again, 3 sharp raps, and this time it wasn't at her bedroom door. It came from inside her closet. She froze. Every inch of her body screamed to run, to scream, to tear the house down with her bare hands if it meant getting away. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The closet door creaked open, inch by inch, and though it was too dark to see, Tessa knew something was in there. Watching, waiting. She never remembered falling asleep, but she woke with the faint smell of dirt and rust in her hair, her fingertips stained black. Her mirror was different now. Her reflection wrong. It moved half a second too late. Its eyes lingered too long. When she blinked, it blinked twice. And sometimes, when she stared hard enough, it smiled on its own. Still, she told no one. Her mother was starting to unravel in her own way. She burned dinner twice. Misplaced keys that ended up in the fridge. Left all the windows open one night despite the chill. "I just needed some air," she said, staring out the window like she was expecting something. Or someone. Tessa tried to ground herself. She went to the local diner, sat by the window where the sun hit her skin, and ordered a milkshake. Normalcy, that's what she craved. But even there, it found her. The waitress, same girl from before, hollow smile and dead eyes, set the drink down and leaned in close. Too close. "You shouldn't have gone in," she said. Her voice was flat, but her fingers trembled. "The house marks you. You fed it." Tessa blinked. "What?" But the girl straightened and walked away without another word. She left the diner shaken, her appetite gone, and as she turned the corner onto her street, her stomach twisted. The McCallan house, she could see it from where she stood, looked closer, as if it had shifted, leaned forward like a predator that had noticed her again. At home, she found her mother crying silently in the kitchen, staring at the front door. She didn't ask. She didn't have to, because she saw it too. 3 scratch marks carved into the wood, just beneath the mail slot. Deep, fresh. That night, the knocking didn't wait until 3. It came just after 1 in the morning. Not from the closet, not from the walls, but from beneath her bed. She sat up, her body ice. The knocking, steady, patient, rattled through the floorboards. Then a voice, hoarse and familiar, "Let me out." She leapt from the bed and bolted into the hallway, flipping on every light switch she could find. But light didn't help anymore. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. The corners of the room seemed to breathe. And for the first time, she noticed the smell of the house had changed. It smelled like a grave. The following day, she visited the town archives, desperate for answers. Buried in a dust-coated filing cabinet were a series of newspaper clippings from decades ago. One headline read, "Family of 4 vanishes in Elridge House." No signs of struggle, no follow-up, no investigation. Just a brief note that the property had been sealed and all information classified by order of the town council. Classified. In Red Hollow. Another article from 1973 spoke of a girl named Molly Cartwright, age 11, who had gone missing after playing near the edge of Elridge. Her parents heard her screaming. By the time they got to the street, the air was silent. Her shoes were found at the gate. Nothing else. There was no mention of a funeral. Tessa realized then, this wasn't just a haunted house. It was a trap, a wound in the town that never healed. A hunger that the town had learned to live with, ignore fear. And now it had her scent. That night, the dreams changed. No longer did she see the girl with the stitched mouth. Now, she saw herself. Dozens of versions. Some with missing eyes. Some crawling on all 4s like animals. One, laughing maniacally as she carved words into her own skin. "Feed it." She woke with scratches on her arms. Not deep, not bleeding, but unmistakably real. The closet door was wide open, and inside it stairs, not like before. These were new, different. Jagged, crooked like broken teeth, leading not down, but up into a space that shouldn't exist. The attic. They didn't have one. She was sure of it. She screamed for her mother, but there was no response. She ran through the house, calling her name. Silence. Then she found the bathroom door locked. From the other side came a sound that didn't make sense. A wet chewing. Gurgling, she kicked the door in. The room was empty, only a trail of red, not quite blood, leading to the tub. The mirror above the sink was shattered, and in the shards she saw herself, every reflection twisted, warped, and screaming. She backed out and ran. To the yard, to the street, anywhere. But the town had turned against her. Streetlights flickered. Storefronts closed early. People avoided her gaze, as if she had been marked. She remembered what the girl at the diner said: "You fed it." But when? What had she done? Then it hit her. That night in the McCullen house, when the door opened by itself. When she touched the flesh-covered wall. When she stepped into the mirror room. She hadn't just entered. She had offered something, and something had taken it. Maybe her fear. Maybe her image. Maybe a piece of her soul. Back home, she found her mother asleep on the couch, safe, breathing. She collapsed beside her, needing the comfort of another human, even if only for a moment. But as she drifted into exhausted sleep, her mother's eyes opened. Not slowly, not naturally. They snapped open wide and unblinking, and she smiled. The smile was not her mother's. It was something else's. Tessa shot upright, but her mother was already asleep again, as if nothing happened. Had she imagined it? She wanted to believe that. She needed to. But in the window's reflection, they were not alone. A third figure stood behind them, tall, thin, featureless. And it waved. Tessa didn't sleep that night, or the next. The stairs in the closet remained. She blocked the door with furniture. But every morning it was open again. And now a new sound emerged from the space above. A heartbeat, slow and deliberate, like the ticking of an ancient clock. The McCullen house no longer waited for her to come to it. It was already here, inside her home, inside her blood. And deep inside her, something had started whispering back. Tessa hadn't opened the closet in 3 days, but that didn't matter. The stairs were growing. She could hear them. Each night the creaking came a little closer, like the steps themselves were building toward her. Not downward into darkness, not upward into space, but forward, into her room, into her life. On the 4th night, something knocked from inside the wall. Not the closet this time, not the hallway. This time it came from behind her bed. She sat up, breath caught in her throat, heart galloping. Another knock. Not heavy, not fast, just deliberate. Then a whisper, so soft it barely passed as sound. Her name. Tessa. The same rasping voice she'd heard in her dreams, in her bones, now calling to her through the plaster. She pushed the bed away from the wall. Listened. Knock, whisper. Knock. A soft, dragging groan of wood. She leaned in. The wall was warm. She placed her ear against it and gasped. It wasn't just noise. There were words. Full sentences. But overlapping, layered, like 100 voices trying to speak through one narrow mouth. She heard weeping, screaming, pleading, and one voice, clearer than the others, repeating, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." Then silence. A crack split down the middle of the wall, tiny, barely a hairline, but it was there. And from it a thin line of something black oozed out, sluggish and thick. Tessa staggered back, tripped, and hit the floor hard. She scrambled to her feet and ran. She didn't stop to grab her phone. Didn't call her mother. Just bolted out the front door and into the night. The town looked wrong. It had always been quiet after dark, but now it felt empty in a different way. Like every soul had been plucked out, leaving only the shells. The lights and windows were on, but no shadows moved behind the glass. No cars passed. No wind stirred, and yet she felt watched. Not by people, but by the buildings themselves, as if the town had turned to face her. She walked for an hour, past the park, past the school, all the way to the diner. It was open, She hesitated at the door. Inside, the same waitress stood behind the counter. But this time, she didn't smile. Her eyes were sunken, lips cracked and colorless. As Tessa stepped in, the bell above the door didn't ring. There was no sound at all. "Help me," Tessa said. Her voice cracked. "Please. I don't know what's happening." The girl's head tilted slightly. "You brought it back?" Tessa froze. "The house is not a house," the girl went on monotone. "It's a mouth. And it was hungry. And now it knows yours tastes sweet." "What do you mean?" "I didn't do anything." The girl smiled, her teeth suddenly too sharp. "That's the trick. You don't have to do anything. You just have to open the door." The lights flickered. Behind the counter, the clock spun wildly. Plates rattled. Then, all at once, the diner fell still again. The girl leaned in, whispering it used to feed every decade. Then every year. Now, it doesn't wait anymore. Tessa backed away. "Why me?" "You went inside." "That's enough." She ran. The road home stretched longer than she remembered. The streets twisted, turned. Houses she'd never seen before towered, where none had stood the day before. She turned a corner expecting her block, but found only rows of fences and empty yards. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. Then the sound twisted, grew deeper, wrong, like the cry of something pretending to be human. She finally found her street again, just before dawn, but it wasn't the same. The sky above her house pulsed red. The windows were all fogged, as if the house itself was breathing. Her mother stood on the porch, but not quite. Her eyes were open wide, too wide, and unmoving. Her mouth hung open, slack. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She only stared. Tessa crept closer. "Mom." The woman didn't react. Tessa reached out to touch her, and her mother collapsed. Just crumpled, like a puppet with its strings cut. She hit the ground hard, no sound, just silence. Tessa screamed. The neighbors didn't come. No lights turned on. She dropped to her knees, grabbing her mother's shoulders, shaking her. "Please," she cried. "Please wake up." And then her mother's eyes flicked up. For a second, just a second, she was alive again. "It's in the walls," she whispered. "Don't let it out." Then her body convulsed, and a thick stream of that same black fluid poured from her mouth. She went still again. Gone. Tessa staggered to her feet, sobbing, backing away. The porch creaked beneath her. The house groaned. From within, she heard footsteps. Her footsteps. She turned. In the window, her reflection stood, not moving, watching, smiling. The front door opened by itself, and she understood something then, something terrible. The thing inside the McAllen house hadn't followed her. It hadn't invaded her home. It had become it. Had grown roots in the walls, spread like a disease through the pipes, the cracks, the beams. Every creak, every whisper, every chill. It was claiming her house from the inside out, and now it wanted her. Tessa didn't go inside. She ran to the garage and grabbed a hammer. If it was in the walls, she'd tear them down. If it wanted her, it would have to come out. She marched back in, breath ragged, and slammed the door behind her. The house didn't react. She walked to the wall behind her bed, the one that whispered, and raised the hammer. It struck with a dull thud, again and again. Chunks of plaster fell away, revealing something beneath. Not wood, not insulation, but flesh. Tessa gagged. The wall pulsed under the light, veins twitching, muscles spasming around the blows. She hit it again and again, screaming, crying, until the hammer sank into the wall like it had struck meat. It shuddered. Then the voice came again, louder, clearer, from everywhere. "You are mine." The lights burst. Glass exploded. The floor rippled, and the crack in the wall tore open like a mouth, and from within it came a hand, pale, long-fingered, twisted. It reached for her. Tessa screamed, and the mouth behind the wall smiled, because she had opened the door, again. The hand that came out of the wall didn't move the way a hand should. The fingers bent too far backward, the joints folding like wet paper. Its surface looked human, but the longer you stared, the more wrong it became. The skin rippled, shifted, as if it were breathing, as if it were thinking. Tessa didn't scream this time. She couldn't. Her breath lodged in her throat as the air around her thickened, syrupy and hot. A second hand followed the first, then a third. The wall tore further open with a sickening pop, not just splitting down the middle, but curling outward, like it was glad to be opening. Like it had waited a very long time to show her what it had been hiding. What emerged from the wall wasn't a person. Not really. It had her height, her shape. But its face, oh God, its face. It was her face, but copied. Stretched too tightly, too smooth in places and too wrinkled in others. Like someone had tried to remember what Tessa looked like from memory and sculpted it with their eyes shut. It blinked both eyes at the same time, slowly, deliberately. Then it smiled. Tessa backed away, stumbling over the bed frame, heart roaring in her ears. The thing stepped out from the wall and stood in the middle of her room. Its legs were long, bare. Feet swollen and blackened as if they'd been walking through wet earth. Its neck pulsed. Not with a heartbeat, but with something sliding just under the surface, worm-like, living. It tilted its head. "Where will you go?" it asked, in her voice. Not an imitation. Her exact voice, syllables perfectly matched. "There's nowhere left." She ran. Down the stairs, out the front door, into the cold gray of early morning. The sky looked wrong, too low. The clouds hung like wet curtains, dripping mist as thick as breath. But what chilled her most was the silence. Not the still kind of silence, but the waiting kind. Like the world itself had paused to see what she would do next. She didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see that thing following her, wearing her face like a stolen mask. She ran until her legs burned, until her lungs scraped inside her chest, until the edge of the woods came into view at the far end of Red Hollow. No one in town dared go there, not because of animals or people, but because the forest had rules. Rules whispered down for generations in stories that sounded like fairy tales but tasted like warnings. Don't walk in after dark. Don't follow voices, and if you see your reflection, run. Tessa didn't care. She ducked under the bent barbed wire and vanished into the trees. The forest swallowed sound. No birds, no rustle. The ground beneath her feet was soft, spongy, almost too soft. Her footsteps didn't echo, didn't crunch, just sank. She kept walking. The mist followed her like a second skin, clinging to her clothes, her hair, her mouth. Then came the whispers. Not like the ones from the wall. These were clearer, younger, familiar. Her father's voice, gentle and sad. "Tessa, you left me." She froze. She hadn't heard that voice in months. Not since the funeral. Not since she stood beside his closed casket and tried to convince herself he was resting, not rotting. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is that you?" A different voice answered, her own. "Come see." She turned. No one was there, just trees, but carved into the bark of each one were mouths. Hundreds of them, all open, all gasping. Some had teeth, some blood, all of them whispered. She screamed and stumbled forward blindly, pushing through branches that felt more like fingers. Clawed. Cold. Her heart beat faster than it ever had in her life. Then it stopped, because she saw herself standing at the center of the woods. Her face, her jacket, her posture. This one looked more perfect than the last, like a mirror version pulled from memory rather than flesh. It smiled. "You don't belong here anymore." Tessa's hands shook. "What are you?" The thing stepped forward. "I'm you," it said softly. "I'm the part you gave away." "No," she whispered, backing away. It followed, slowly. "You entered the house. You touched the mirror. You looked into the mouth. That's all it takes. It marks you, replaces you, piece by piece." Tessa tripped on a root, fell to the ground hard, palms stinging. The forest pulsed around her, leaves vibrating without wind. The mouths in the trees groaned in unison. "You're unraveling," it said. "Soon even you won't be able to tell who's real." Tessa rose and ran again. No path, no logic, just forward. She stumbled into a clearing and found something that shouldn't exist. A replica of her house. Right there. in the forest, same color, same porch swing, same wind chime her mother brought from Tennessee, but the air around it was colder. The windows were fogged over with something dark red. She stood, trembling. If she didn't go in, she'd freeze to death out here. If she did, she might never come out. But something in the air shifted. A sound. Not whispering this time. Crying. It was her mother. That changed everything. She bolted up the steps and into the house. The interior was the same, but not quite. Everything leaned. The walls blood. The paintings stared. But the sobbing came from upstairs. She took the steps 2 at a time, ignoring the ache in her legs, her cracked ribs, her fractured will. At the top of the stairs, she stopped. The thing waited at the end of the hallway. This version of her was taller. Face smeared in mud, eyes missing. Tessa ducked into the nearest room, the bathroom, and slammed the door shut, locked it. Sat against it, shaking. But the sobbing was still coming from somewhere. Closer now. Behind the mirror. Her reflection stared back. Then it leaned forward and grinned. Without moving, without hesitation, the reflection whispered, "Let me out." Tessa's breath caught. The sobbing stopped. Then a bang on the door behind her. The lock clicked on its own. Slowly, the door creaked open. She braced herself. Every inch of her body coiled like a spring. But no one entered. The hallway was empty. She stepped out, inch by inch, and realized something horrifying. Every room was now hers. Copies, mutated versions. One filled with dolls that looked like her. One with a mirror where her reflection screamed silently, "Forever." One with her mother's body stitched into the mattress, breathing through the springs. And then she heard the laughter. Dozens of voices, all her. And from every angle, they began to chant in unison, "One becomes many. Many becomes none." She ran blind, crashing through a door, tumbling down a flight of stairs she didn't remember existing. She landed hard, bones ached, head spun, darkness swallowed her. When she woke, she was back in her actual house. Not the replica. Not the twisted version. She was on her bedroom floor, sunlight pouring through the blinds. Everything looked normal. For a moment, she thought she dreamt the whole thing. Until she looked in the mirror. Her reflection blinked twice. She did not. Tessa stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. The reflection kept smiling. And then she realized something far worse. There were 2 shadows behind her. She turned. Her mother stood in the doorway, silent, pale, eyes blank. Then another Tessa stepped from behind her, identical in every way, smiling. "You look tired," it said. Tessa screamed, lunged for the window, and jumped. She hit the grass outside with a sickening crunch, ankle twisting beneath her. She crawled, sobbing, dragging herself down the street, screaming for help. The sun was out. People were walking dogs, mowing lawns. But no one looked at her. They couldn't see her. She ran to the diner. The same girl behind the counter turned and frowned. "Tessa," she said to the door, where the other Tessa now stood, perfect and whole. The real Tessa pounded the glass, screamed. The girl didn't hear, didn't see. She had been replaced. Her skin stolen, her voice stolen, her life stolen. And as the door slowly shut behind her reflection, Tessa realized the horrible truth. She wasn't the one who had escaped the house. The house had escaped through her. And now it was wearing her face, her voice, her memories. It had found a way in, and it wasn't going back. There was no sound. Not from the people brushing past her on the street, not from the wind that twisted the trees into strange shapes, not from her own screaming fists slamming against the glass door of the diner. Tessa's voice didn't carry. Her breath fogged the glass, but the sound died at her lips. It was as if the world had moved on without her, sealed tight like she had become part of the mist that clung to every inch of Red Hollow. She was invisible, and the thing wearing her skin was already blending in. She turned, trembling, stumbling back into the street. Her ankle throbbed from the jump, a sharp twisting pain that turned every step into a limp. But the pain was a lifeline, the only proof she still existed. The only thing that tied her to herself anymore. A child on a tricycle pedaled by, humming a soft tune. Tessa moved into his path, desperate, waving her arms, mouthing "help me" again and again. But the boy rode straight through her. Straight through. Tessa fell backward, air gone from her lungs, heart frozen. He didn't swerve, didn't stop, didn't see her. She lay on the cold pavement, gasping, eyes fixed on the sky, and wondered if this was death, not the grave, but the fade. To be erased from the world piece by piece until all that's left is the echo of your screams in a place that no longer listens. But the world had other plans. Somewhere to her right, she heard something snap. A branch, a bone. She wasn't sure. But she turned toward the alley beside the bakery and saw a man watching her. Not the way the others watched. Not like the smiles too, wide, stare too, long kind of people the town had twisted. No, he saw her, truly saw her. His coat was torn at the shoulders, stained with something dark and dried. His beard was patchy, face lined with age and exhaustion. But his eyes were wild and alive and filled with a kind of recognition that nearly made her sob. "You see me?" she whispered. He nodded. She staggered to her feet, dragging her twisted ankle behind her, and limped toward him. "Help me, please. They took my face, my life, the house. I know what it does," he interrupted. "I've been watching it for years." That voice, low, gravelly, like someone who didn't talk much anymore. "What is it?" she asked. He stepped back into the alley. She followed. "It's not a house," he said. "It looks like one because that's what we understand. But it's older than this town. Older than wood. Older than shape. It found a crack in the world here, and now it hides where we can't see, where we won't see." She stared at him. "You knew this. And you stayed." He looked up at her with haunted eyes. "Someone has to." His name was Clay. And he told her the truth in pieces, each word heavier than the last. "The house didn't just copy you. It didn't just replace you. It hollowed you out. It studied you. Your voice, your laugh, your memories, and it kept the pieces it didn't need, tossed them into its walls, fed them to its roots. And what came out the other side was never quite right, just right enough to fool the world. Just enough to slide back into your life. How do I get it back?" she asked, desperate. "My body, my name, my life." "You don't," Clay said. "Not all of it." She wanted to scream, wanted to hit him. But his voice dropped into a hush, and he nodded toward the shadowed part of the alley, where something flickered just beyond the light. "But you can steal what it stole from others. The lost ones. The ones who never made it back." He told her about the hollowing. "Once you were taken, you weren't erased all at once. Your soul, your identity, yourself. It unraveled like thread. But if you found those pieces, if you could gather them again, you might not go back to who you were, but you could become something new. Something stronger." It wasn't about getting her old life back. It was about not letting the house keep her. Clay reached into his coat and handed her something wrapped in cloth. When she opened it, she stared down at a jagged shard of glass. A mirror. But not any mirror. "I broke into it once," he said. "Years ago. Managed to steal that piece before it could seal me in. If you take it back to the house, if you show it to the reflection that wears your face, it'll see you again. And then you'll have a chance." She nodded, clutching the shard tightly. "But Tessa," Clay said, eyes darkening, "it'll do everything to stop you. Once it knows you're not gone, it'll hunt you like blood." That night, she didn't hide. She didn't run. She walked straight back to Elridge Lane. The McCollin house stood waiting, windows glowing faintly like the eyes of a sleeping beast. The air around it buzzed with tension. The grass curled away from her feet. The iron gate creaked open without her touching it. She stepped through. Every step felt heavier, like the air thickened just for her. Her fingers curled tightly around the shard of mirror in her pocket, its edge sharp enough to draw blood if she wasn't careful. Inside, the house breathed. The walls throbbed. The floor rippled beneath her feet like muscle. She walked anyway. The hallway was longer than it should have been. The staircase twisted upward into angles that hurt to look at. But she didn't go up. She followed the sound. That horrible dragging sound. That wet whisper of something crawling inside the bones of the house. It led her to the basement door. She didn't hesitate. The stairs groaned under her weight. The light from the hallway didn't follow her. Darkness thickened with each step, until the only thing she could hear was her own heartbeat. And the hum of voices just beneath it, whispering versions of her name. At the bottom was a door, same as before, made of flesh. She pressed her hand against it. It opened. The mirror room hadn't changed. Hundreds of versions of herself still screamed silently from behind the glass. But something was different now. The reflection in the center stood still, watching her. It was her. The imposter, wearing her shape, her skin, her smile. Tessa stepped forward, and the thing smiled wider. Come to give it up finally, it asked, her voice almost gentle. Tessa pulled the shard from her pocket, held it up. See me, she whispered, and the mirror cracked, not just one, all of them. Shards shattered, screams erupted. The other versions, the lost, the twisted, the used, burst into smoke and light, pouring into the air, filling the room with a howl of wind that made the very house tremble. The imposter snarled. N.O. It lunged at her, face twisting, arms stretching longer than they should have. Tessa drove the mirror shard into its chest. The thing screamed, not in pain, but in recognition, and then it began to collapse. Skin folding inward, eyes bubbling black, voice dissolving into static. The ground beneath her cracked. The walls shook. The mouth of the house bellowed its rage as the imposter burned away, consumed in the light of what had once been Tessa, but now something more. She didn't leave through the door. She stepped through the mirror and woke up in her own bed, but she wasn't the same, because her mother was there, alive, smiling. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, voice light and free. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Tessa sat up slowly. The mirror in her room was gone. All the photos on her wall were normal again. Her dog wagged his tail, barking happily downstairs. The world had reset, but she knew the truth. The thing that had stolen her was gone. But the house was still there, waiting, and she was no longer just Tessa. She was what came back through the glass, and next time the house opened its door for someone else, it might find her waiting. The peace didn't last. It pretended to, of course. The days flowed smoothly at first, a little too smooth. Like watching a stage play where everyone knew their lines, but delivered them just a beat too late. Tessa woke in her bed every morning. Sunlight spilling across the floor, her mother humming in the kitchen. The scent of breakfast floating through the air like a memory too perfect to trust. But the quiet wasn't natural. It was still, measured. The calm before a quake. She tried to tell herself she was safe, that she'd beaten it. That whatever thing had stolen her face, her place, her name, was gone now. The mirror had shattered. The imposter had turned to ash. Her mother was alive again. Bowie barked at the door when the mail came. The town even smiled at her again. But deep in her bones, she knew something hadn't been sealed right. The cracks might be hidden, but they were still there. And it started with the mirrors. The first time, it was small. A handprint on the bathroom mirror after her shower, even though she hadn't touched it. It was too small to be hers. A child's hand. Open. Pressed flat. She wiped it away, breath caught in her chest, refusing to acknowledge what it meant. But the next morning, it was there again. Bigger this time. Smudged. As if dragging downward. Then the reflections started lagging. Not all the time. Just once in a while. Enough to catch in her peripheral vision, to question whether her eyes had played a trick, or whether the world was slipping again. One night, as she brushed her teeth, she looked into the mirror and saw her reflection watching her. Not matching her. Watching. Its hands were still. Her heart locked up. She backed away. The reflection smiled and blinked with the wrong eyes. Eyes that weren't hers anymore. She turned and shattered the mirror with the heel of her boot, glass exploding across the sink like frozen rain. Her mother came rushing in. What happened? Tessa couldn't answer, because when she turned to explain, her mother's face wasn't quite right. Just a flicker. A fraction of a second. But long enough. The smile too wide. The eyes too calm. And then it passed. Her mother blinked and touched her arm. Tessa, are you okay? And suddenly the room felt too small. The walls closer, like they were leaning in. That night, Tessa didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching Elridge Lane from afar. The McCallan house looked like it always had, silent, crooked, patient. But now there was something else. A shimmer in the air around it, like heat waves from asphalt. Like the skin of the world around it was trembling. And in the window, for just a second, she saw herself. Not the imposter, not the twisted version, her, staring back, mouth moving, but no sound. She read the lips anyway. It never ends. Then it vanished. The next day Clay returned. He didn't knock, didn't text. Just showed up on her porch, eyes shadowed, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. You feel it too, he said. Tessa nodded. It's still here. He looked past her into the house. Not here. Everywhere. You cut off a limb, not the body. That house is just one mouth. There are others, more than I've ever found. Her stomach twisted. So this is happening in other places. He nodded, face hard. The pattern's always the same. People vanish. Time warps, reflections lie. And always there's a house, not built. Born. She stared at him. What do we do? Clay set down his bag and opened it. Inside were maps, photos, journal pages soaked in ink and desperation. We hunt them, he said. Before they spread, something inside Tessa sparked. Maybe fear, maybe fire. But she nodded. Then let's find the next one. But the next one found her first. That evening, her mother didn't come home. Her car was in the driveway. Her purse on the kitchen counter. But no sign of her. Tessa searched every room, calling her name until her voice cracked. She checked closets, behind doors, under the bed. Then she found the note. Tucked into the fridge handle. 4 words, I'm in the mirror. Her blood went cold. She turned to the hallway. Every mirror in the house had reappeared, perfectly intact. Not broken, not cracked, just waiting. She screamed for Clay. He came running, breath ragged, and when he saw the hallway, he stopped dead. His face drained of color. That's not her handwriting, he whispered. But she's gone. She's not in the mirror, he said. That's a trap. Tessa didn't believe him. She had to check. She stepped into the hallway, mirrors lining both walls, endless versions of herself stretching in either direction. She moved slowly, each footstep echoing louder than the last. The air shimmered. In the last mirror, she saw her mother, pale, crying, trapped. Tessa reached out, and Clay tackled her from behind, yanking her away. The mirror cracked, not with glass, with laughter. Her mother's image peeled apart like paper, revealing something underneath. Something that smiled with teeth far too many, far too hungry. You can't save her, Clay said, pulling her up. Not from that side. If she's in there, she's gone. Tessa wiped her eyes, rage replacing sorrow. Then we break every mirror it can hide behind. She didn't wait for an answer. She smashed every mirror in the hall, one by one. Glass flying like sparks, each one releasing a breath of wind that screamed as it escaped. But when she reached the last one, it didn't break, it resisted. Clay pulled a crowbar from his bag and jammed it into the edge of the frame, and the wall opened. Not like drywall, like skin. Behind the mirror was a passage, narrow, breathing, alive. Tessa turned to Clay. We go in, she said. He didn't argue. They stepped into the mirror, and the world shifted, everything bent. Time folded in on itself. The hallway turned into a tunnel, and the tunnel opened into a space that didn't follow the laws of architecture. Rooms stacked inside each other. Stairs that led nowhere. Doors that opened into eyes. Every surface pulsed. Every shadow whispered. And in the center of it all, the thing. Not the imposter, not the house, but what the house served. A shape too big for her eyes, wrapped in bone, shrouded in skin, with a face that changed every time she blinked. And when it saw her, it smiled, the same smile it had always worn, because it remembered her, and it was glad. The war had only just begun. The moment Tessa stepped into that space behind the mirror, reality stopped obeying its rules. There was no floor, but she didn't fall. No ceiling, but the pressure above her skull felt suffocating. Shapes moved where they shouldn't. Colors pulsed that didn't belong in any spectrum she knew. Time slipped. Seconds stretched, hours collapsed, and she had the sinking, hollowing feeling that she was no longer inside something, but beneath it. Beneath thought, beneath logic, beneath the skin of the world where all the discarded things went to rot and remember. Clay was behind her. Close, breathing hard, eyes darting in every direction. "Keep your eyes forward," he muttered, his voice thin and strained. "Don't let it learn your name." "What does that mean?" she whispered. But he didn't answer. They walked, or maybe the path moved under them. Every few steps, the walls pulsed with veins that throbbed like they carried memory instead of blood. The air was sticky, as if they were walking through the residue of dreams too dark to survive waking. Tessa felt her name peeling off her skin with every breath. Not forgotten, stolen. The hallway led them to a chamber, vast, empty. Silent at its center stood a tree, but not a tree. It looked like one. Towering, gnarled, its branches reaching out like begging hands, but it was made of bone. The bark split and healed with every second, revealing eyes that opened and blinked before sealing again. Around its base, mirrors floated like leaves, dozens of them, each one spinning slowly in the dark. Tessa stepped closer and saw her own face in every one. Different ages, different wounds, some smiling, some crying, some begging. "What is this place?" she whispered. "It's where it stores the lives it can't use," Clay said. "The scraps, the failures. It remembers every version of you it ever dreamed." She reached toward one of the mirrors. Clay grabbed her wrist. "Don't. It'll pull you through. One touch, and you're nothing but another copy in its mouth." Then the tree moved. Slowly, deliberately, its roots cracked through the black floor, twisting and curling as they reached toward the ceiling, or what passed for it. The bone flexed, joints popped, and from its center, something stepped out. It wore her face, not the broken version, not the smiling one. This one looked exactly like her. Her hair, her eyes, her stance. But behind its gaze there was no soul, only hunger. "You came back," it said. "You always do." Tessa took a step back, heart thunderous in her chest. "You're not me." The copy tilted its head. "That's not what your mother thought. That's not what the town thinks. You gave me everything. Your scent, your breath, your shape, and now you want it back." "I want her back," Tessa hissed. "My mother. Let her go. She's not yours anymore." The mirrors began to scream. Not a metaphor, not an illusion. They screamed. Each one echoed a different version of her voice, laughing, crying, choking, cursing, and the sound rose into something unbearable, something sharp enough to split teeth. Tessa fell to her knees, hands clamped over her ears, blood seeping between her fingers. "Stop!" she shrieked, and the sound cut off like a switch had been flipped. The copy of her smiled again. "You're not strong enough." Tessa stood, wiping the blood from her ears. "Then why do you look afraid?" The thing blinked. It didn't speak. Because it was afraid. Tessa pulled the shard of mirror from her pocket, the one Clay had given her, the piece of the original reflection, and aimed it at the imposter. The chamber darkened. The mirrors began to spin faster. The tree shivered. The imposter took a step back. "Where did you get that?" Tessa advanced. "You took my name, my face, my voice, but you left me with something." The shard glowed now, faintly. It pulsed with heat. Her fingers ached to hold it, but she kept it pointed. "You left me with hate." She plunged the shard into the nearest mirror. It shattered. and with it, the face of one of the other Tessas vanished in smoke. The bone tree groaned. The roots twitched. Clay joined her, swinging a crowbar into another floating mirror. Glass flew. Screams cut through the dark. One by one, they broke the reflections, and with each one, the imposter weakened. Its skin flaked. Its smile cracked. "You can't kill me," it spat. "I don't have to," Tessa whispered. "I just have to starve you." The tree screamed. The walls folded inward. The chamber trembled like a dying beast. The final mirror shattered beneath her boot, and for a moment the imposter screamed not in rage, but in loss. And then it was gone. Not exploded. Not melted. Gone. Like it had never been there at all. The chamber collapsed. Clay grabbed her hand and pulled. They ran. The walls closed in behind them, shrieking, twisting, bleeding light and shadow. The path turned to teeth. The ceiling fell into fire. And then, just before they were swallowed, they burst through the mirror, back into her house, back into the hallway. Both of them collapsed on the floor, panting, bloody, burned, but alive. The mirrors were gone. Every last one. Her mother came running from the kitchen. She looked normal. Tired, but real. She dropped to her knees beside Tessa, sobbing. "Where were you?" "I couldn't find you." "I heard you screaming, but There were doors where the room should be, and then nothing. Tessa held her like she'd never let go. Later that night, she sat with Clay on the porch. The wind was back. The stars looked real again. "It's gone," she said. Clay shook his head. "That one maybe. But the house is the real one, it's still watching." She didn't speak. He leaned forward. "You felt it too, didn't you? When you were inside? All those other doors, the reflections that weren't you?" "Yes." "Those were other people. Other towns." Tessa turned to him slowly. "Then we're not the only ones." He nodded. And in the silence that followed, they both understood Red Hollow was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, in another quiet town, another door was opening. Another mirror was smiling. And another person just like her was about to vanish. This time, she'd be ready. Because once you've looked into the mouth of the house, once you've survived it, you don't go back to being who you were. You become the thing it fears. And for the first time in her life, Tessa smiled back. The days that followed felt quiet in the way an abandoned theater might. Stage still set, curtains drawn, lights dimmed. But you knew, somehow, the show wasn't over, just paused. Tessa tried to move on, to breathe freely in a world where her mother smiled again, and the house at the end of Urridge Lane stood silent, as though the roots had retreated back into sleep. But peace, she learned, was just the part where the water is still before it breaks into a wave. She still felt it. At night, in the hours when the sky turned its darkest shade of blue, she'd wake with her pulse thrumming and her mouth dry, convinced someone had just whispered her name inches from her ear. Every time she turned on the light, she was alone. But the feeling didn't leave. It pressed against her ribs like a secret waiting to be let out. Even Bowie, her dog, her companion, her final living tether to normalcy, would growl at empty corners, hair rising like he saw something she couldn't. It was Clay who broke the silence first. He came by early one morning, standing on the porch with his hat pulled low and a thick file under his arm. He didn't speak until she let him in and made coffee, both of them pretending this was just another Thursday. When he finally opened the folder and spread its contents across her kitchen table, Tessa saw that familiar look in his eyes again. Not fear, not panic, but knowing. The same kind of knowing that lives in people who've been too close to the fire and still smell the smoke on their clothes years later. Photographs, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, all from different towns. Some far, up in New York, west to California. Others closer. Too close. One was only 2 towns over, a place called Withers Grove. Same pattern: missing people, reports of strange noises, abandoned homes with no history of sale or construction. And in one photo, faded, taken from behind a chain link fence, Tessa saw it. The same kind of house, not identical but unmistakable. The angles too sharp, the windows too dark, the way the front steps leaned forward like a tongue slipping out to taste the world. Different places, Clay said quietly, same design. Tessa felt a chill creep up her spine. They're connected, he continued. I don't know how. I don't know if it's one thing moving, or 1,000 things sharing one hunger. But it's not over. She studied one of the clippings. A man in his 50s had gone missing in Withers Grove, last seen talking to himself outside an old colonial house no one remembered being built. His wife claimed he started saying odd things about reflections, about doors inside walls. He'd told her the house was breathing when no one else could hear it. Then he vanished. Tessa looked at Clay. When did this happen? He checked the date. 4 days ago. Her hands clenched. I'm going there, she said. Clay didn't argue. They packed that night. Just the essentials. He handed her a blade. Cold iron, smooth hilt, carved with symbols that looked old, older than language. She didn't ask questions. She could feel the weight of it, not just in her palm, but in her blood. Most of them, Clay said as they drove, don't know what's happening. The people who go missing, they just feel a pull. They feel seen. That's the trap. The house doesn't always need to chase you. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it invites. Withers Grove was quiet when they arrived. Trees taller than buildings. Roads cracked with age. And at the end of a forgotten sack, behind a wall of ivy and rotting fences, they saw it. The new house. Smaller than the McAllen house. But the energy was the same. The air around it refused to move. The front yard was covered in dead leaves, though no trees stood nearby. A single bird sat on the power line above it, completely still. Tessa stared back at it, and for a moment, it felt like a test. They didn't go in at first. They waited, watched, for hours. Then, just before sundown, the front door opened by itself. A creak that echoed too far, too long, and from inside came a whisper that didn't travel through air, but through thought. Tessa. She froze. Clay saw the way her face changed and pulled her back. It remembers you. She nodded. I think I remember it too. Then this time, he said, we go in together. The moment they stepped over the threshold, the world behind them folded like a page in a book. The house swallowed sound, devoured light, and their footsteps no longer echoed. They were absorbed. It was worse than last time. The walls whispered in her voice now. Childhood fears, old regrets. Fights she thought she'd forgotten. Her mother's voice asking, why didn't you save me the first time? And worse, her own voice answering, because I didn't want to. She gritted her teeth, blade in one hand, flashlight in the other. This house had fewer rooms, but each was wrong in new ways. The kitchen was filled with clocks, hundreds of them, none ticking, but all pointing to 3:03 a.m. The living room had a painting of a family, but the faces were blurred, swirling as if caught in wind that didn't blow. And the hallway, longer than the house could allow, was lined with pictures of her. Not as she was, as she might have been. In one, she held a baby. In another, she wore a wedding dress. In another, she was dead. Lying in a coffin, mouth open, eyes still watching. Don't look too long, Clay warned. It's trying to give you choices it can use. Then they heard it. From upstairs, a creaking. Footsteps. Slow, heavy. They moved together, quiet but sure. Up the stairs that seemed to stretch longer than they should. The second floor was dark. But the darkness wasn't from the absence of light. It was from the presence of something else. At the end of the hallway, a door waited. Unlike the others, this one wasn't warped or decayed. It was clean. New. Almost pristine. And from behind it came humming. A lullaby. Familiar. Tessa stepped closer. That's my mother's voice, she whispered. Clay held out his hand to stop her. It's not. You know it's not. Tessa stared at the door. Her hand trembled on the knob. But she didn't turn it. Instead, she knocked. Once. Twice. 3 times the humming stopped, and her voice answered. Tessa, Is that you? Clay's eyes went wide. He pulled her back. Don't answer. The door rattled. Something pressed against it from the other side. Then the voice changed. Deeper. Hungrier. I can wear your voice forever. Tessa pulled the blade free, holding it firm. I'm not here to listen, she said. I'm here to end it. The door burst open, but nothing came through, only a mirror, tall, standing by itself in the middle of a windowless room. Her reflection stepped out of it, different this time, older, weathered, eyes glowing faintly. It didn't smile, it spoke. There are more of us now. You're not the only one who made it out. What? Tessa breathed. The house has cracks. They slipped through too, and now they remember. Who? Clay asked. The ones who were taken. The ones who never stopped screaming. We remember what the house eats, and soon it'll choke. The reflection flickered, faded, and the mirror shattered on its own. From behind it, a staircase spiraled downward into impossible black. Tessa looked at Clay. He didn't say a word. Together, they stepped into the dark, because it wasn't enough to survive anymore. Now they had to burn it. All of it. Before the house could build another door. Before it could whisper another name. And before someone else looked into the mirror and mistook it for their own reflection. The stairs beneath the broken mirror had no end, at least, not one that made sense. Tessa counted each step at first, hoping the rhythm would anchor her, keep her thoughts sharp, her fear contained. But by the 300th step, numbers lost meaning. Her knees ached, her breaths came ragged, and her flashlight began to sputter like it was afraid too. Clay followed just behind, silent. But she could hear the tension in every breath he took. Neither of them spoke, afraid that if they did, their voices would echo forever into some dimension that hadn't been drawn on any map. Then the stairs stopped, abruptly. No warning. 1 second, steps beneath their feet, the next, stone, and in front of them nothing. A void, a hollow expanse of ink, black space where gravity didn't seem to matter. There were shapes, distant, shifting, too far away to name. Lights that pulsed like the heartbeat of something enormous buried beneath the dark. And directly ahead, floating in the center of this impossible world, was the house. Not the Withers Grove house, not the McAllen house, the original, the one that all the others had been shadows of. It was massive, endless, constructed from nightmares and memory. Rooms built on top of rooms, some upside down, others sideways. A hallway stretched out of the roof like a limb. Windows blinked like eyes. Doors opened and shut without touching the frame. The entire structure spun slowly, suspended in the air, tethered to nothing but the screams that echoed faintly from within. This isn't a building, Clay said finally, voice thin with awe. This is a thing. It grows. Tessa stepped toward the edge of the stone platform they stood on, staring at the abyss between them and the house. So how do we reach it? The answer came as the void shifted. A path emerged, made of bones, carefully stacked, twisted together, screaming faces embedded in their surfaces. It stretched like a tongue from the mouth of the house to where Tessa and Clay stood. It wants us to come, she said, grimacing. Or it thinks we don't matter anymore, Clay replied. Either way, they had no choice. They walked the bone bridge, every footstep echoing with muffled cries. Faces beneath their feet opened mouths, as if trying to warn them, but the words never formed. Tessa didn't dare look down. The darkness beyond the bridge felt sentient, waiting to catch a misstep, a moment of weakness. A broken thread of courage. At the threshold of the house, they stopped. The door was waiting, massive, black, carved with symbols older than language. The moment Tessa touched it, it didn't open. It inhaled. The door wasn't a barrier. It was a lung, and now it knew their breath. The house accepted them. They were inside. The walls moved when they blinked. Paintings stared back. Every step brought them deeper into a maze that refused to obey geometry. They would walk down a hallway and find themselves back in the same room, open a door to reveal the underside of a staircase that led nowhere. The rooms weren't just traps, they were memories. Rebuilt. Replayed. In one room, Tessa saw her childhood bedroom, right down to the teddy bear missing an eye. Her mother's voice called her from the hallway, soft and warm. "Honey, I made your favorite." She almost believed it. But Clay grabbed her wrist. "Don't speak," he hissed. "If you answer, it binds you to it." They kept moving. And then came the room of eyes. Walls lined from floor to ceiling with mirrors. Some warped, some pristine, some cracked and bleeding light. In every one, a version of Tessa stood, some old, some young, some dead. One banged furiously on the glass, eyes wide in silent panic. Another sat with her back turned, slowly rocking and humming. But one Tessa wasn't behind glass. She was in the room, standing, watching. She was exactly the same. No distortion, no flicker. Clay stepped forward. "That's not her. It's the one we'd buried back in Red Hollow. The imposter. Still alive. Somehow." Tessa raised the iron blade. The double raised her hands, stepping back, pleading with her own voice, "Wait, please. It tricked me, too." But the fear in her eyes wasn't real. The hesitation, however, was. And in that split second, the imposter lunged. Tessa met it halfway, blade slicing through the air. The thing shrieked, not with pain, but fury. It blood-black smoke, its skin peeling into strips of paper that curled and burned mid-air. "You can't kill what's already taken root," it hissed as it fell. "We're not here to kill," Tessa said. "We're here to burn." The thing collapsed into ash, and the mirrors began to crack, one by one. Each reflection of Tessa shattered, not from the blade, not from force, but from the truth. Her mind had changed. She no longer questioned if she belonged, no longer feared being replaced. She knew who she was now. The house couldn't feed on doubt it didn't own. The ceiling split, light poured in. The house screamed, walls convulsed, floors twisted. The structure began to shift violently, as if the soul of the place had sensed its own infection. Tessa and Clay ran, dodging collapsing rooms and melting corridors. Every step closer to the center felt like moving toward the belly of a beast tearing itself open. At the heart of the house, they found it, the maw, not a mouth, not exactly. It was an opening, endless, lined with teeth the size of trees. The air around it pulsed like lungs. The walls blood memory, people long devoured, voices stolen, lives rewritten. The maw was the engine of it all, the place where beings were broken into parts and sold back to the world as fakes. Tessa stepped to the edge. She could see them, faces inside. Thousands, some still screaming, some whispering her name. "You came back," they said in unison. She looked at Clay. He lit the flare. "We end it here." Tessa held up the blade, now glowing, not with light, but heat. It pulsed with the names of the lost, vibrating with the fragments of all the people the house had ever taken. She didn't speak a final word. She didn't have to. She threw the blade into the maw. The flare followed. The explosion wasn't fire, it was memory. Every stolen piece, every fake face, every distorted echo detonated outward, ripping through the house with the weight of countless broken names. The house convulsed, its walls peeling back, foundations cracking, voices howling in rage and grief, and finally, silence. Everything folded in on itself, collapsed. And then there was light, blinding, and the sound of birds. Tessa blinked. She was standing outside, sun on her skin, wind in her hair, and Clay beside her, staring up at the sky as if seeing it for the first time in years. The house was gone. No wreckage, no rubble, just a field where it had once stood. Tessa looked down. The grass was green, not corrupted, not dying, real. For the first time in weeks, she took a full breath. Clay broke the silence. "It'll try again, somewhere else. Different door, different mask." She nodded. "Then we keep going." They walked away from the field, not in fear, not in retreat, but with purpose. Because some things deserve to be feared, and some things deserve to be hunted, especially the ones that wear your face. For a few weeks, the world held its breath. Red Hollow settled back into its sleepy rhythm. The house was gone, No debris, no charred soil, not even an outline left in the earth to hint it had it ever been there. The neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid it now walked their dogs past the empty lot without even glancing. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the world had agreed to pretend the wound had never been torn open. But Tessa knew better. She felt it in her spine when the wind blew too cold through an otherwise warm morning. She saw it in the eyes of passing strangers. Some who looked too long, others who looked through her like she wasn't there. And every now and then, when she closed her eyes at night, she dreamed of mirrors, some shattered, some whole, and one, always one, that pulsed with breath and whispered in her own voice, "You left the door open." Clay stayed in Red Hollow longer than he expected. His truck, forever rust-bitten and threatening to die, coughed itself into a full breakdown 2 days after they returned. He didn't seem to mind. He took up a spare room at the local inn, paid in cash and silence, and spent his days in the library, flipping through records older than the town itself. Looking for the pattern, he'd say, but his voice always dipped on the last syllable, like he knew deep down there wasn't one. Tessa, on the other hand, couldn't sit still. Every night she walked, through the woods, past the park, sometimes all the way to the edge of town, where the farmland crept into forgotten trails, and the air turned colder. That's where she found the mirror. It wasn't supposed to be there. Just a full-length, ornate thing standing in the middle of a field, rooted to nothing, untouched by dirt or rain or time. She almost missed it the first time. Fog curled thick around her ankles, and the moonlight barely lit her path, but something pulled her eyes toward it. There it stood, alone, waiting. It was clean, too clean. The frame was silver, etched with tiny symbols that hummed when she looked at them too long. She approached slowly, heart pounding, hand itching for the small blade she'd started carrying at her hip again. When she reached the mirror, she did what she swore she wouldn't. She looked, and the world fell away. Not violently, not suddenly. It unraveled. Sound first, the crickets and rustling trees faded into silence. Then color, bleeding out of the grass, the sky, even her skin. Then weight, her body lost its pull to the earth. She stood in a space that wasn't dark, wasn't light, wasn't anything. And in the mirror, not her, someone else. Another girl, same age, same build, but different eyes, haunted, older. Like she'd seen what Tessa had seen, but worse. They stared at each other. Then the girl spoke. "You're not the only one it touched." Tessa didn't move. "Where are you?" The girl's eyes welled. "Somewhere on the other side. I don't know the name of this place, but I remember mine. That's how I've stayed here." I held on to my name. Tessa leaned in. "Are there others? Too many?" The mirror flickered, and now, behind the girl, Tessa saw shadows, some shaped like people, some shaped like mistakes, all watching, all waiting. "It's building again," the girl whispered. "You broke a mouth." "Not the body." Tessa's breath caught. "How do I find them?" The girl placed her palm on the inside of the mirror. "You already did." And then the mirror went black. Tessa staggered backward, collapsing into the wet grass, gasping like she'd surfaced from deep underwater. The fog had cleared. The night was still, but the mirror was gone. She ran to Clay, woke him with shaking hands and fevered words. He listened without blinking. When she finished, he nodded once. "I've heard rumors," he said. "Mirrors like that, they don't show you the past, or the future. They show you who's watching." They went to the field the next morning. Found nothing. But they both knew it hadn't been a dream, because when Clay opened his journal to a map he'd drawn weeks ago, they saw a new mark. A town called Silvermere. A town neither of them had circled. A town they'd never spoken about. But there it was. Circled in black, burned at the edges, waiting. Tessa packed her bag the next morning. Flashlights, batteries, the iron blade, salt, charcoal, all the things they'd used before. But this time, she added something new, a small, jagged shard of mirror from the house that burned in Wither's Grove. She'd kept it hidden in a drawer, half forgotten. Now, it pulsed with a strange warmth in her palm. Clay met her at the edge of town. No words were needed. The road to Silvermere stretched ahead like a ribbon of old scars. As they drove, the radio flickered on by itself. Static at first, then a voice. Tessa's voice, saying over and over, "You left the door open." They didn't change the station. They just kept driving. Because some echoes aren't meant to be silenced. Some doors aren't meant to be closed. And some mirrors don't reflect. They invite. The first thing Tessa noticed about Silvermere was the quiet. Not the kind she had come to expect, the eerie, anticipatory hush that clung to haunted places like skin, but a stranger kind. Too quiet, lifeless. The town wasn't abandoned. People moved through it, opened doors, stepped into diners, crossed streets. But no one spoke. Not a single voice. No laughter, no greetings, no coughs or sneezes or even the idle scuff of footsteps on sidewalk. Just a dense, dead calm, as if sound itself had been siphoned out of the air. She and Clay drove past the town limits in silence, neither daring to roll down the windows. Even the radio had died the second they hit the first welcome to Silvermere sign. The last thing it said still echoing in Tessa's memory, "You left the door open." After that, only static, and then, nothing at all. They parked at the edge of Main Street. The buildings were neat, symmetrical, the kind of place that would have looked charming in a postcard if it weren't for the unnatural stillness. Every storefront had closed signs. Though people were inside, they sat at booths, stood behind counters, walked the aisles of dusty grocery stores, but never made a sound, never looked up. Their mouths moved in silent conversations with no one. Every single one of them avoided mirrors. Tessa noticed that quickly. Store windows were papered over. Bathroom mirrors removed. Not a reflective surface in sight. "They know," Clay said, voice hushed. Tessa nodded. But they've been told not to talk about it. They got out of the truck. The ground beneath their feet was solid, but it felt thin, like something had been hollowed beneath it, waiting for just enough weight to crack the surface. They moved together down the street, passing blank-eyed citizens and boarded homes. A dog barked in the distance, sharp and sudden, and then stopped mid-yelp. Like its throat had been cut off by an unseen hand. They turned a corner and found the church. Its steeple was bent, the bell tower hollow, but the door was open, wide and welcoming, as if expecting them. Tessa paused, one foot on the step, and looked at Clay. "You feel that?" she asked. He didn't answer. His eyes were already locked on the stained glass window above the door. Instead of saints or angels, it showed a mirror, cracked down the middle, and behind it a face, not human. They stepped inside. The chapel was empty. No pews, no altar, just a floor of rotted boards and a ceiling that swayed slightly, as if breathing. In the center of the room, someone had etched a circle into the floorboards. Symbols lined the edges, too old to recognize, too sharp to be decorative. Tessa crouched near it. "It's a seal," she murmured. Clay knelt beside her, running his fingers over the carved symbols. "But it's been broken. Someone opened it." She touched the center of the circle and felt warmth radiating up through her palm. It wasn't heat. Not really. More like memory, regret, longing. 1,000 emotions pressed into the space between floorboards. Something had lived here, and something had escaped. Before they could move, a door behind the pulpit creaked open. A man stepped out, middle-aged, tall, dressed in black like he had always been waiting for a funeral. His face was blank, but his eyes flickered with recognition. "You came," he said softly. His voice was the first Tessa had heard since arriving in town. It was dry, sandpaper, like it had gone too long unused. She stood, cautious. "Who are you, Pastor Gideon?" he said. "Or at least, that's who I was before the mirror came." Clay's shoulders tensed. "You've seen it?" Gideon nodded. "It showed up 3 years ago. Just appeared. In the attic of the rectory. No one brought it. No one claimed it. But we knew. Somehow we knew. He gestured toward the circle. We sealed it. Best we could. Told the town not to look, not to speak its name. It fed on attention, on reflection. So we stopped reflecting, stopped talking. But that only slowed it. It still reached through, one person at a time. Where is it now? Tessa asked. The pastor's face twitched. Gone, but not far. It moved deeper. To where? Clay said. Gideon turned to a back wall. Tessa followed his gaze. A mirror stood there, covered in a thick black cloth. She approached slowly. Her hand reached out, trembling, toward the edge of the cloth. Gideon grabbed her wrist. Don't, he said. If you look, it sees you. Tessa pulled back. We need to find where it went, she said. There's more of them now. The houses, the reflections, they're spreading. Gideon looked at her carefully. You've been inside. Tessa met his gaze. More than once. He nodded, solemn. Then you're marked. The house remembers you. That means you can follow it. Clay looked uneasy. You're saying she should use the connection. The pastor placed a hand on the mirror, still covered, and whispered. If you want to catch what's behind it, sometimes you have to be what it's looking for. Tessa didn't respond. She just walked forward, lifted the cloth, and stared. The glass wasn't a reflection. It was a tunnel, spiraling, alive. She took a deep breath and stepped through. Clay tried to follow, but the mirror turned solid behind her. He punched it. It cracked but didn't break. She was gone. On the other side, Tessa found herself in a world that wasn't built of matter but memory. The ground was photographs. The sky, twisted ribbons of voice and color. Time spun in different directions. People moved backward. Echoes whispered secrets she hadn't spoken yet. The house was ahead, not one house. Dozens, hundreds. Each one a version of someone's grief, someone's guilt, someone's undoing. Floating in the air, crawling across the horizon. A web, and in the center, a new mirror. Tall, silver, bleeding light. It turned toward her like a flower toward the sun, and it smiled. Tessa walked forward, because now she understood. She hadn't just been chosen, she was being watched. And she was going to show them what happened when the reflection starts watching back. Tessa didn't walk toward the mirror. Not really. The ground beneath her changed shape with each step, shifting from carpet to dirt to tile to bone. The sky above her blinked open and closed like the lid of some enormous eye, casting long shadows that moved without source. She wasn't walking toward the mirror. It was pulling her in, drawing her forward like a breath pulling air, as though she wasn't walking but being inhaled. The mirror at the center of this twisted realm had grown. It stood 10 feet tall, framed in pulsing silver that quivered with every heartbeat not her own. The surface didn't reflect, it rippled. It watched. And Tessa knew with a bone, deep certainty that it wasn't just glass or portal or even memory. It was a being, conscious, aware, and for the first time, curious. As she neared it, the ripple flattened. Her own face appeared in the surface, but not her as she was now. Not the hardened, scarred Tessa who had faced the house and walked out alive. No, this reflection was her from years ago. 16, hair unbrushed, fear in her eyes, confusion in her posture. The moment right after her father died. That helpless, shattered version of herself. The version the house had first smelled. First wanted. You can't trick me, Tessa said quietly. The mirror smiled, not her reflection, the mirror. The glass itself bent at the corners, curving into a grin like flesh stretching over a secret. Then came the voice, low, sweet, her own again, but softer. As if it had just learned to whisper and wanted to see how far it could make her follow. You've been such a good key, Tessa. Such a strong little door. She didn't flinch. You took my face, she said. You crawled into my life and turned it inside out. Now I'm going to return the favor. The mirror shuddered. From behind her came movement, a shifting in the air. When she turned, the world had changed. Houses now stood like gravestones, lined in neat rows, each one identical to the last. Front doors ajar. Lights on. and from every window, a face watched her, all her own, some crying, some smiling, one burning silently, another cutting open her own palm and bleeding across the window glass. The mirror spoke again. "We are not the enemy." Tessa laughed once, harsh, bitter. "You wore my mother like a coat, she wore herself. We only opened the door." A new face formed in the mirror now, Clay's eyes wide, bleeding, and behind him, another version of her. No, not another version. The first version, the original copy, the one she thought they'd destroyed in Withers Grove. It smiled without lips. "He's still alive," the mirror said. But not for long. Tessa's fists tightened. She stepped closer to the mirror, breathing slow and steady, calling on every shard of strength she'd earned. Not inherited, not imagined, but earned. "You want to feed," she said. "I'll give you something to choke on." She pulled the shard of mirror from her coat pocket. The one from the house that burned. The one that had never stopped humming. It pulsed in her hand now like a heart too eager to burst. As she held it up, the air crackled around her. The mirror in front of her recoiled, the surface twisting in pain. "You don't belong here," it hissed. "Neither do you." She drove the shard into the mirror's surface. Not gently, with fury. The glass didn't shatter, it screamed. A sound that didn't come through her ears but through her bones. The entire world around her convulsed. Houses exploded inward, windows shattering as the faces within screamed. A pulse of energy shot out from the mirror, knocking her back into the shifting dirt. Her vision went black for half a second, and when it returned, the world was tearing itself apart. The mirror bled light. Not white, not golden, something deeper. Color that couldn't exist in the waking world. And from its wound something climbed out tall. Thin, not human, but wrapped in human skin, stretched like parchment across too many limbs. Its head was smooth, featureless, except for the dozens of eyes that blinked open across its chest, its arms, its hands. Each one with her iris, each one watching. "Your mind is cracked," it said. "You are easy to slip into." Tessa stood, wiped blood from her temple. "No. I've seen myself break and come back again. I'm not easy. You are inviting." The creature lunged. She rolled aside, blade in hand, slashing upward. The iron tore across its leg, and it screamed. A burst of images flooding her mind, her mother weeping, Clay burning, Bowie howling at a door that would never open again. She fought the visions, stood her ground. "You're made of reflections," she said, backing the creature toward the mirror. "But what happens when you finally see what's really inside?" She held the shard again, not toward the monster, toward herself. The reflection in the shard showed her. Bloody, shaking, terrified, but real. Whole. And in that reflection, the creature flinched. Because it couldn't mimic truth. It could only echo fear. The light from the mirror flared. The creature howled. She plunged the shard into the ground. The earth opened, and it swallowed the beast whole. As it fell, its voice echoed one last time. "This isn't the last door." She turned back to the mirror. It was cracking now, no longer screaming, just breaking. And in its final moments, it showed her something: a field, a cabin, and another face, not hers, someone new. A girl, 12, standing in front of a mirror that had begun to shimmer. Another beginning, another crack. Tessa knew what she had to do. She closed her eyes and stepped back through the mirror, back into the church, back into her own world. Clay was on the floor, coughing, but alive. The air was still. The mirror was gone. She helped him up. "It's moving again," she said. He nodded, wiping blood from his mouth. "Where?" She looked at the burning vision still etched behind her eyelids, and said one word: "Wyoming." Because the house had never stopped. It had just paused, and now it was building again. And this time, she wasn't just hunting it. She was following its blueprints. The road to Wyoming stretched wide and silent beneath a sky that didn't feel real anymore. Not to Tessa. Clouds rolled overhead like stitched fabric, too uniform, too perfectly timed, as if they weren't clouds at all, but something pretending to be weather. Even the sun, which once warmed her skin, now only cast shadows, longer than they should be, always reaching east, no matter which direction the truck faced. She sat in the passenger seat of Clay's rust-bitten pickup, her boots propped against the glove box, hands gripping the mirror shard. She kept wrapped in a torn piece of linen. It pulsed against her palm like a heart that didn't belong to her. They had no address, no coordinates, just a vision, a flash from the mirror before it cracked a cabin, a field, a girl with eyes too wide and shoulders that sagged with the weight of something she didn't understand yet. Tessa hadn't told Clay all of it. She couldn't. Not the way the mirror had spoken inside her. Not the way it had seen through her. Dug deep into the cracks she thought she'd already sealed. There were no secrets from it, only doors. And it knew exactly how many were still left to open. Clay drove with one hand on the wheel, the other clutching a cigarette he didn't light. He hadn't spoken much since Silvermere. He didn't need to. There was an understanding between them now, quiet and heavy, that they weren't chasing the house anymore. They were following it because it wanted them to. Because it had found something in Tessa that made it curious, and things like this didn't get curious unless they saw something worth consuming. They reached the cabin 3 days later. It wasn't abandoned. That was the first wrong thing. The grass was cut. Smoke curled from the chimney. A child's bicycle leaned against the porch railing. Everything about it screamed ordinary, and that was how Tessa knew they were in the right place. The house didn't crash through the world with teeth and screams anymore. It had learned how to wait, how to blend in. They parked a mile down the road and hiked in on foot, through waste, high grass and tangled trees that seemed to shift when not watched directly. Tessa felt them breathing, felt their branches move even without wind. The forest knew. It remembered. At the edge of the field, she saw the girl, 12, maybe 13, freckles, barefoot, standing in front of a cracked mirror propped against an old fence post. She stared into it, unmoving, lips slightly parted like she was waiting for something to speak back. Tessa stepped forward. Slowly, carefully. "Hey," she said, voice low. "What's your name?" The girl didn't flinch, didn't look away. Her eyes shimmered with tears that hadn't fallen yet. "Tara," she whispered. Clay held back in the tree line, watching the house, scanning windows. Ever the sentinel. Ever the backup plan. Tessa approached until she stood beside the girl, careful not to meet her own reflection in the mirror. The surface was warped, not quite glass, more like water with memory, and beneath its surface, things swam. "How long have you been staring into it?" Tessa asked. Tara shrugged. "It showed up last week. I thought it was just junk at first, but then I started seeing things." "What kind of things?" "My sister. She died when I was 6, but I see her in there. Every day, she tells me she's cold, says I can help her if I just reach in." Tessa's chest tightened. "Did you?" "No," Tara said, "but I want to. That's the worst part. I want to." Tessa knelt in front of her. "You're strong. You haven't opened the door yet." Tara looked down. "But someone did." "What do you mean?" The girl pointed toward the house. "My mom. 2 days ago." Clay swore from the trees. Tessa stood fast. "Where is she now?" Tara turned toward the cabin. "Inside. But it's not her anymore." The air shifted. The front door creaked open. And standing in its frame, Tessa froze. Because the woman who stepped out wasn't just wrong. She was familiar. The same eyes. The same mouth. The same curve of the chin. It was her own mother. Not as she'd last seen her, alive, broken, healed, but as she'd been before the house ever touched them. Warm. Smiling. The version she remembered from childhood. Tessa didn't move. She couldn't. The woman on the porch opened her arms. "Tessa, baby," she called, voice velvet and sun. "You came back." Clay stepped forward, gun raised, not aimed but ready. "It's not her," he said. But Tessa's knees nearly buckled. Her mother looked so real, and then she saw it. In the shadow beneath the woman's feet, a second silhouette, twisted, reaching up through her legs like a puppet master with too many strings. Tessa stepped forward, blade in hand. "You're not her," she said, voice breaking. "You're not even close." The smile twitched, then tore, and the thing inside her mother's face laughed. "Oh, child," it said, "you think this is about you." The sky darkened, not with clouds, with reflections. Mirrors hovered above the field, hundreds of them, each showing a different face from Tessa's past. The version of her that almost drowned in 6th grade. The one who hid in her room when her father's body came home. The one who begged the house to stop whispering. They all began to speak at once. "You left us. You brought it here. We are what you threw away." Tessa screamed and drove the blade into the earth. The mirrors exploded, one by one, raining down shards of frozen light. The sky ripped open, and the thing wearing her mother's face began to change. Its body melted backward, bending the wrong way, limbs twisting into smoke. It lunged, but not for her, for Tara. Tessa moved like lightning, slamming into the girl and pulling her back just as Clay fired. The bullet didn't hit flesh, it shattered air. The thing screamed and scattered into the wind, leaving behind a single object. A mirror, small, palm-sized, still glowing. Tessa picked it up. Inside she saw her reflection, and behind it more cabins, more children, more doors. She looked to Clay. "It's not one house anymore," she said. "It's a network." He didn't look surprised, only tired. "They're building faster now," he said. Tessa turned to Tara, still shaking, still holding back sobs. "You're not alone," Tessa told her. Not anymore. Because now Tessa understood this wasn't a haunting. It wasn't even possession. It was a system. A map of mirrors, each one waiting to open. And she was going to be the hand that broke them all. They didn't sleep that night. The sun hadn't fully vanished before Clay had already begun carving a perimeter of salt and iron around the cabin, while Tessa gathered what she could, the broken mirror shards, the burning remnants of the creature's laughter, and the smallest, faintest reflection still glowing in the field. Tara stayed close to her side, dazed but steady, clutching a flashlight that barely cut through the shadows now creeping in from every side. This place was no longer part of the real world. They had crossed into something else. Every time Tessa glanced up, she saw reflections of places they hadn't visited, places the mirrors wanted them to see. A narrow alley in a city where people moved without mouths. A lakeside cottage where a girl sat underwater, smiling up from the depths, never breaking the surface. A school hallway littered with lockers, every one cracked open to reveal rows of teeth instead of books. The mirrors weren't just windows anymore. They were veins, and the house had a heartbeat again. After nightfall, the field began to change. The grass twisted as if something enormous shifted beneath it. Roots? No, worse. Tendrils of glass buried just under the soil, glowing with a sickly light. Each thread moved with precision, connecting invisible points in the earth like a buried constellation. Tessa realized they were standing on something larger. Not a house, not even a mirror. A system. "It's mapping," she said aloud, her breath catching. Clay looked up from where he was placing iron nails in a circle. "What?" Tessa pointed to the glowing roots beneath them. "It's growing, branching out. Every mirror it leaves behind is a node, a limb, a doorway. This isn't about fear anymore. It's about scale." Clay followed the line of light with his eyes. "Then how do we cut it down?" Tessa knelt beside the vein and placed her palm gently against the earth. It was warm, throbbing with energy. But more than that, it was listening. She could feel it pulse back at her, probing her skin, recognizing her. And it knew. It remembered her, not as a threat, as a carrier. "You can't," she whispered. "It's not something you trap. It's something you trap. Something you isolate." She stood and turned to Tara. "How far does this mirror go? Do you see it in your dreams?" Tara hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes it talks to me. Tells me stories about places I've never been, About people who have my face. Tessa closed her eyes. The connection was getting faster, stronger. It didn't need houses anymore. It didn't even need physical mirrors. It could move through dreams now. Memory. It had adapted. It's learning, she said. Clay didn't flinch. Then we need to learn faster. That night, Tessa walked into the cabin alone. She needed quiet. And the mirror shard she carried hummed louder when no one was near. She unwrapped it and held it flat in her palm, sitting cross, legged on the floor. The surface pulsed once, then again, a rhythm, a signal, like it was waiting for her to respond. She didn't speak, she thought. Show me where it started. The shard pulsed faster. Light crept up her arm, not burning, but reminding. She felt her bones tremble as images flashed in her mind, a child's drawing of a house with no doors, a shattered mirror buried in a coffin, a hospital hallway full of reflections walking without bodies. None of them made sense, but they all shared one thing. They were connected. The shard pulsed again. This time it showed her something different. A map. Not of roads or countries. Of glass. Lines crisscrossing the globe. Roots of light spreading from one point outward. Some reached across oceans. Some tunneled underground. But the center, the beating heart of it all, was marked by a jagged hole, like a tooth knocked from a jaw. No label. No coordinates. Just a single symbol burned into the glass. Tessa didn't recognize it, but the shard did. It screamed. The cabin erupted with energy as the shard exploded in her hand, flinging her backward against the wall. Her vision went black, the sound of glass shrieking still ringing in her skull. Clay burst through the door, weapon raised.
Tessa!
She groaned and sat up, blood trickling from her ear. I saw it. He helped her to her feet. What? The origin. The place where it all began. It's still out there. Clay's jaw clenched. Can you find it? She nodded. I think I just did. He looked at her, expression dark. Then that's where we go. But Tara's voice broke through the silence from the porch. No, it's already coming here. They turned. She stood with wide eyes, staring at the field. The grass had split open. A tear in the earth, long and glistening, like a wound cut into reality. And from it, a shape began to rise. Not a house. A mirror, bigger than the cabin, bigger than the field, framed in bone, breathing, reflecting the sky back with a new star that pulsed in time with Tessa's heartbeat. And in that reflection, Tessa saw something that turned her blood cold, her own face, but younger, terrified, staring through the mirror as if trapped on the other side. Tessa took a step forward, and the girl in the mirror took a step back. This wasn't a reflection. It was a prison, built to resemble her, built to bait her. It's not just feeding anymore, Tessa whispered. It's growing bait, growing copies. Clay cursed under his breath. It's duplicating consciousness. Like spawning traps, Tessa stared at the image. No, not traps. Daughters. Behind her, the sky cracked open again. Dozens more mirrors blinked into existence across the field, each one tall, silver, humming with voices. And from inside them, shadows leaned forward, smiling. Some wore her face, some wore Tara's, some were people she hadn't met yet, but all of them watched. Tessa turned, eyes burning with something colder than fear. Resolve. We're not just chasing it anymore, she said. We're inside it. Clay nodded grimly. Then we burn it from within. Tessa turned toward the largest mirror, the one shaped like her. She took a breath and stepped through. It felt like falling, but not downward. As Tessa stepped through the mirror shaped like herself, there was no lurch, no tug of gravity. It was quieter than silence, colder than space, and emptier than any feeling she had ever known. There was no up or down, no time, no breath. Just her and her name, and even that was slipping, bleeding from her like warmth through open skin. The mirror was eating it. Her. But she clung to the memory of Tara's frightened face, to Clay's grim resolve, to the burning H of every version of herself that had been stolen, twisted, and used like a tool. That defiance kept her tethered as the nothingness cracked around her. Hairline fractures spread across the dark like ice forming over water, and then light. She landed. Not hard, not soft, just landed. Like the ground appeared beneath her to catch her in the moment. She stopped being nothing. Around her stretched a room made of mirrors, floor to ceiling, curving into a dome with no visible entrance or exit. Each mirror pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat out of sync with her own. Some showed fragments of people, eyes blinking, mouths speaking, but no full body, no complete soul. Tessa recognized some of them. A girl from the Withers Grove cabin, a man she'd seen in a Silvermere newspaper clipping, her father's reflection, smiling with a mouth that hadn't smiled in years. They weren't real. They were echoes, reflections held too long, memories trapped in glass. This place wasn't just the center of the house. It was the house. The engine beneath the skin, the brain behind the eyes. The source. And she had walked right into it. As she stepped forward, the floor pulsed under her feet, a faint ripple like stepping on a drum. Her footsteps made no sound. That terrified her more than any scream would have. The house was listening, and it had stopped pretending not to. She spoke aloud, her voice cutting across the mirror, skin walls. You brought me here. You've been pulling strings since Red Hollow. So show yourself. Nothing moved. Then the mirrors around her began to rotate, slow and deliberate, revealing other versions of the room behind them. Each mirrored world flickered with activity. Some showed children curled in fetal positions inside glass boxes, eyes open but blank. Others showed towns, frozen in moments, a church mid-service, where everyone looked at a mirror instead of the altar. A subway car where passengers had mirrors for faces. A hospital ward where patients lay still as their reflections screamed in panic from the glass above their beds. Each mirror was a door. Each door was a trap. And behind every trap was a purpose consumption. Then the central mirror, bigger than the others, black, rimmed and slick as oil, began to ripple. A figure formed in it, human-shaped but wrong. Limbs too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its skin made entirely of shifting glass. It wore her face again, but older, gaunt, as if starved. Its mouth moved, but no sound came. Then it leaned forward and stepped out of the mirror. Tessa didn't move. The thing mirrored her down to the scar on her left wrist, the mole on her shoulder, the shape of her nails. But the eyes were not hers. They were smooth glass, endlessly deep, showing not what it saw, but what it wanted her to see. And what it wanted was everything. The creature walked toward her slowly, movements glitching slightly, like frames missing from a video. It didn't speak with a voice. It spoke through her memories. Her father's lullaby spilled from its lips. Her mother's scream from the cabin echoed in its breath. Even Clay's gruff warnings twisted into its throat like it had mined her mind and used her deepest sounds to mock her. I know you, Tessa said flatly. The creature tilted its head. You're not a monster, she went on. You're a collector. That's all this has ever been to you. Faces, names, stories. You gather them and twist them, chew them like sugar until they taste the way you want. The creature stepped closer. You're not feeding, she hissed. You're rewriting. That stopped it. The creature paused, its head turning ever so slightly, almost intrigued. You tried with me, didn't you? She said. You thought I'd break. But I didn't, and now I've seen what you really are. It opened its mouth. And out came a dozen voices at once. All hers, all wrong. You are still part of us. I am what you made when you opened the door. You are the mirror that cracked. The words felt like wind inside her bones, but she stood tall. No, she whispered. You're what happens when a mirror wants to be seen. The walls of the chamber shuddered. The mirrors dimmed. For the first time, the creature stepped back. Tessa pulled the final shard of mirror from her pocket. The one Clay had found in a long, abandoned attic, the one they'd carried from town to town. It no longer pulsed. It burned. This is your blood, isn't it? She said. The last vein they never sealed. She drove the shard into the floor, and the house screamed. Not the creature, not the reflections, the house itself. The sound wasn't noise. It was pressure, a massive rush of thought and hunger roaring through her body, trying to crush her will. But she didn't let go. She screamed back, pouring every memory, every name it had tried to steal from her, into the wound she'd made. The dome began to collapse. Mirrors shattered, sending waves of truth flooding out. In one, a child vanished from inside the glass, her real body flickering back to life in a hospital room miles away. In another, a man gasped awake inside a subway, shattering the mirrored mask over his face. Tessa kept going. She slammed the hilt of her blade into the floor again and again, each strike cracking the core of the house. Glass veins above her burst, raining sharp truths. The creature howled, its form flickering between hundreds of stolen identities. Tessa's, Clay's, Tara's, her mother's, strangers she'd never met but knew by the weight of their pain. The creature lunged. She caught it with the blade. It didn't bleed. It shattered. The echo it made as it broke wasn't sound. It was release. And with it, the world tilted. She was flung backward through a storm of broken mirrors, light and memory whirling past her like torn pages from a book set aflame. Every reflection she'd ever seen, every shadow that had watched her, rushed past. Then, stillness. She landed in the grass outside the cabin, stars blinking above her, Clay shouting her name in the distance. Her body ached, her mind spun, but she was whole, and the mirror. Gone. No glass in the field, no house, no voice. Just Tara asleep by the fire Clay had built, safe. She sat up, heart thundering, lungs aching. Clay ran to her, dropping to his knees. "You're out." She nodded slowly. "It's cracking. The root. I found it. I broke something real." Clay looked past her, toward the field. "Then we need to move before it grows back." Tessa didn't argue, but something nagged at her. She looked at her hands. They trembled, not from weakness, but resonance. She could still feel the house. Still hear it, faintly, in the back of her mind. Because breaking the mirror hadn't killed it. It had made her part of it. The mirrors had been maps, but now she was the compass. And wherever the house went next, she'd feel it. She'd know. Tessa stood slowly, every bone aching, but her mind clearer than it had ever been. "I can find the next one," she said. Clay stared at her, then nodded. "Then we don't stop." They packed in silence. The fire died out. Tara slept through the night without nightmares. But in the distance, beyond the trees, something shimmered faintly. Not a mirror, not yet. Just a piece of glass, waiting. And for the first time, Tessa didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. Because now, she understood the pattern. And the house had made a mistake. It thought she was a door. But she had become a lock. The road unspooled like a scar across the land, winding through forgotten towns and patches of forest that whispered too loudly when the wind passed through. Tessa hadn't spoken in hours. She sat rigid in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the horizon, hands clasped in her lap, palms raw from gripping that jagged mirror shard for too long. Her fingers bore the marks of something deeper than cuts. Symbols she hadn't carved but that had appeared after she stepped through the core mirror. At first, she thought they were burns, but they didn't hurt. They throbbed when the house stirred, when the air got too still, when silence felt too thick. Clay watched her from the corner of his eye. She'd changed. Not just hardened, shifted. She moved differently now. Sharper. Like she wasn't just watching the world anymore, but measuring it. Testing it. And the silence between them wasn't empty. It was loaded. Electric with all the things they didn't know how to say. They didn't talk about the thing she killed in the core of the mirror system. Didn't talk about the way the glass bled or the way it screamed when it broke. They didn't talk about the children they'd seen in those reflections, or how some of them might never find their way back into the real world. Those topics sat between them, weighty and quiet, like a passenger they didn't want to acknowledge. Instead, they followed the hum. Tessa had no words for how she felt it. It wasn't sound, not vibration, just presence, like a string tied around her spine, gently tugging her toward somewhere she hadn't been but already feared. Every time they passed a signpost, she felt it buzz faintly in her skull. Not pain, recognition. That's how they found Penhallow, a town so small it didn't appear on most maps. A dozen blocks, a gas station, a diner with dust on the counter, and a church where the bell had rusted into place. But it was wrong. Tessa felt it the moment they rolled into town. The reflections were too clean. Windows without smudges. Car mirrors that didn't show what was behind them. Even puddles shimmered too clearly. Nothing had the distortion of reality. Everything mirrored perfectly. Too perfectly. "This is where it's hiding," Tessa said as they passed a child standing on a porch, staring into the reflection of a turned-off television. The screen was black, but the child's lips moved like she was whispering a secret. She didn't look at them as they drove past. None of the townspeople did. Every one of them was focused on their own image. Clay slowed the truck and parked at the edge of a street that seemed to fade into shadow halfway down. Despite the afternoon sun, Tessa stepped out and the ground welcomed her. It rippled beneath her boots like glass beginning to melt. "They're trapped," she whispered, "but not behind mirrors this time." Clay looked around. "What do you mean?" "They've already stepped through." He turned to her. "Then what are we seeing?" She met his gaze. Their reflections. What's left of them. Penhallow wasn't a town anymore. It was a projection. A shell left behind after something crawled through the mirrors and gutted the people within. This place still stood, but it pulsed with ghost light and mimicry, a cracked version of itself. They entered the diner first. The bell above the door rang, but no one looked up. The patrons sat at booths, forks paused mid-air, eyes wide, as if someone had just told them the worst news of their lives. But they didn't blink, didn't move. Clay whispered, "They're frozen." "No," Tessa said, "they're listening." She walked to the center of the diner and looked into the mirrored panel behind the counter. Her reflection smiled before she did. Clay cursed, "It's watching us." A voice echoed from the mirror. Not Tessa's. Not Clay's. Someone else. "You broke the chamber," it said. "But the house is deeper than that. We are roots. We are in the foundation." Tessa stepped forward. "You don't get to wear people anymore," she said. "You don't get to hide." The mirror cracked slightly, just at the corner. Then came the reply. "We are not hiding. We are spreading." And then all the people in the diner turned at once. Not their heads. Just their eyes. Every pair locked onto Tessa. Their mouths open. And they screamed. But no sound came out. Only wind. Sharp, slicing wind that tore through the air like a razor across silk. Plates shattered. Glasses exploded. Clay tackled Tessa as the mirror behind the counter detonated in a blast of cold light. They hit the floor, covering their heads as the windows blew inward, shards slicing the air. When the light faded, everyone was still again, staring forward, blank, as if nothing had happened. But the scream still echoed. In Tessa's mind. She stood, blood trickling down her cheek from a slice above her brow. "We have to find the source," she said, staggering toward the door. "It's not just showing people reflections anymore. It's consuming them whole, turning towns into mirrors." Clay didn't argue. They moved through Penhallow block by block. Every home had the same signs. People moving. Yes, but empty. Their voices gone. Their faces stretched into replicas of themselves. Tessa felt the buzz grow stronger the closer they got to the center of town. Then they reached it. An old barn falling in on itself. Roof caved. Doors broken. It shouldn't have drawn her attention. But the air around it vibrated, shimmered, watched. This wasn't the heart of the town. It was the mouth, and it was open. Tessa entered first. Inside, every surface was covered in mirrors, cracked, bent, some rippling like water, others still as stone. The air smelled like breath, wet, warm, too close. And in the center, nailed to the floor, was a chair. In it sat a girl, teenage. Long black hair, eyes shut. Mirrors floated around her in a slow orbit, and as they passed in front of her face, her skin twitched, her lips moved, like she was reciting names in her sleep. Tessa stepped closer. Clay held back, weapon drawn, watching the mirrors. "She's the conduit," Tessa said. "It's using her to echo, to project the town." Clay nodded grimly. "Then we wake her up." Tessa reached forward, but the mirror orbiting the girl tilted toward her, and inside it she saw herself, not broken, not hunted, but consumed, a version of her with glass skin and eyes that blinked sideways. It spoke, "You are already part of us." "No," Tessa hissed, pulling the mirror shard from her pocket. "This is where I end you." She pressed the shard into the center mirror. The mirrors spun faster. The girl screamed, really screamed, voice breaking into the real world, and the entire barn quaked. Clay fired at the swirling glass, breaking several reflections. One by one, they exploded in a burst of wind and memory. Tessa held the shard to the girl's forehead. "Wake up," she whispered. "You're not theirs." The mirrors screamed. The girl's eyes flew open, and the entire town went silent. Then, shattered. Not literally, but whatever false world had been drawn around them fractured. The sky flickered. The people froze. The buildings cracked. And from the wreckage rose something tall, slender, and smiling. Not a person. Not quite. It had her face again, and Clay's. And Tara's. Layered like a mask with too many skins. "We are not the house," it said. "We are the locksmith." Tessa raised the shard. The creature only laughed. "You locked us once," it said, "but locks can break." And then it vanished. Just gone. Tessa staggered back. The barn collapsed. The girl lay in Clay's arms, breathing hard but alive. Tessa turned in a slow circle. The mirrors were gone. Penhollow was empty. Not frozen. Just gone. Wiped clean. And she felt it again. That tug in her spine. Another mirror opening. Another mouth waiting. The system wasn't just active. It had countered. Tessa looked at Clay. "Get in the truck," she said, her voice like steel. "We're not just chasing it anymore. We're hunting the locksmiths." It didn't wait for nightfall this time. The house, or whatever had grown beyond it, didn't care about shadows anymore. It didn't need darkness to hide. It had tasted enough of the world to walk in daylight now. That was what Tessa understood as she and Clay left the ruins of Penhollow behind. The road ahead shimmered unnaturally, and the air carried a weight she couldn't place, a kind of pressure, like standing too close to a speaker before it plays a sound. Something was building. Something knew she was coming, and worse, it wanted her too. The girl they rescued, the conduit used to anchor the mirror town, never spoke again, not even as they brought her to a quiet hospice just across the state line. She blinked, she breathed, but whatever part of her had been human before Penhollow was either buried too deep or burned away. Tessa stood at her bedside before leaving, watching the girl's eyes shift behind their lids, tracking something not present. She wasn't dreaming. She was receiving. That's when it clicked. "The locksmith," Tessa whispered to Clay as they stepped outside. "It's not just one thing, it's a network. Builders, keepers. It sets the mirrors. It chooses the hosts. The house is just the manifestation. But there's something bigger coordinating all of it." Clay looked at her, jaw tight, arms crossed as he leaned against the truck. "You think it's sentient? I think it's more than that," she replied. "It's strategic. It's choosing weak spots, people who've been fractured already, places that are forgotten, quiet. It doesn't just build doors. It finds the ones already cracked, and then it sends in the locksmith." Clay nodded slowly. "So the question is, why you?" She didn't answer. Because she didn't have to. They both knew. Because she broke and came back. Because she carried part of the mirror now, in her blood, under her skin. Because the house saw her as one of its own and as its enemy, all at once. She was a paradox. And in systems like this, paradoxes either became keys or triggers. The next pull came 2 nights later. No dream, no reflection. Just the humming, deep in her spine, low and constant, like a note being held somewhere beneath the world. She followed it without speaking, driving south through back roads that narrowed with every mile, eventually arriving at a place so isolated it hadn't seen electricity in years. A rusted mailbox, a gravel drive overtaken by vines, a long dead barn that leaned like it was whispering to the trees, and a farmhouse, still standing. Tessa stepped out of the truck before Clay finished cutting the engine. "It's in there," she said. He looked around. "Doesn't look like the others." "It's not. This isn't a door." She glanced back at the house. "This is a workshop." Clay pulled the shotgun from behind his seat. No protest. No questions. Just resolve. They moved in silence toward the porch. The wood under their boots groaned with age but held. The door wasn't locked. It never was in these places. Tessa pushed it open with her fingertips, and the scent that hit them wasn't rot or mold. It was metal. Cold, sharp, sterile, like a tool shed that had never known dirt. Inside, the air shimmered. Mirrors weren't the focus here. Not this time. This time it was tools. Dozens of them, laid out in patterns across every wall: tongs, needles, hooks, wire. All of them made of some strange alloy that shimmered like glass but moved like muscle. The walls pulsed faintly. Every corner of the room breathed. Tessa stepped deeper. At the center of the living room sat a man, thin, bald, eyes shut. His hands rested on a black slab of stone that reflected nothing, not even light. He wasn't bound, wasn't hooked up to any machines, just sitting, waiting. "Is he?" Clay began, but the man opened his eyes and smiled. His voice came before his lips moved. "You came," it said. Tessa raised the shard she always carried. It didn't react. The man, if he even was a man, tilted his head. "No need for that, Tessa. I won't fight you. I'm just here to explain." Clay moved to Tessa's side, gun raised. "Try anything," he warned. The man ignored him. His eyes never left Tessa's face. "You've seen the edges now, haven't you?" he asked. "The borders of the system. The sprawl of the mirrors. But you still think it has a center, a core, something to kill. You still think you can win." Tessa didn't speak. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But what if I told you it didn't start with a house? What if I told you the first mirror wasn't a trap? It was an invitation?" He reached out a hand. Tessa flinched back. Clay stepped between them. "Stay where you are," he barked. But the man laughed softly. "I won't hurt her. I couldn't if I tried. She's already on the other side. She just doesn't know it yet." Tessa's stomach turned. "What are you?" she asked. "I am the locksmith," he said, smiling wider, "or one of many. We don't create. We translate. We find the gaps, the phrase, the people on the edge of breaking, and we offer them a new shape." "You possess them," Clay growled. "No," the man said softly. "We give them purpose. Purpose beyond suffering, beyond grief. The world you cling to is a lie made of reflection. We simply make the mirror honest." Tessa stepped forward. "You wear our faces. You trap children. You turn towns into puppets." "We show you what was always there," he replied. "You just didn't want to see it." Tessa clenched her jaw. "Then you'll see this." She drove the mirror shard into the slab on his lap. It didn't crack. It screamed. The man arched backward, eyes rolling white. Blood streamed from his nose, but he laughed through it. "You think this ends it?" he gasped. "You don't even know what you are." Tessa's breath caught. "What did you say?" He smiled. "You're not a lock. You're the keyhole. They've been building the key. In every town. In every child. Every scream. And soon it will fit." His body seized, then went still. The slab cracked. The tools melted, and every window in the house shattered inward. Clay dragged her out as the walls began to collapse, the wood turning to ash in midair. Behind them, the farmhouse folded in on itself, not burning, not breaking, just vanishing. They stood in the driveway, staring at the place where it had been. There was no wreckage, no debris, just dirt, as if it had never existed. Tessa looked down at the mirror shard. It was blank now, cold. The man was gone, but his words echoed. She wasn't the lock. She was the keyhole, and something, somewhere, was coming. Not to possess her, to fit into her. Clay touched her shoulder. We need answers. Tessa looked at him, and for the first time, her voice shook. No, she whispered. We need to find the key. They drove through the dark with no destination. Just that now, familiar hum vibrating deeper than sound, dragging its claws down Tessa's spine. Every mile put more distance between them and the vanishing house, but the truth it left behind rode with them. Twisting the air in the cab, tightening in Tessa's chest, scratching at the back of her mind like something waiting to be born. She couldn't stop touching her arm where the mirror symbols had once burned. The skin looked normal now, healed, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. Not completely. Clay said nothing for a long time. Just drove, eyes on the road. One hand clenched so tight on the steering wheel his knuckles had gone white. It wasn't fear, it was readiness. The quiet before a fight he knew he couldn't win, but would never run from. Tessa watched him from the corner of her eye. The way his shoulders had stiffened, the way he glanced at her every time she shifted. He was waiting for her to change. Waiting for the key to turn in her without warning. She didn't blame him. She was waiting for it too. When she finally broke the silence, her voice barely rose above the whisper of the tires on wet asphalt. What if it already fits? Clay didn't look at her. She pressed on. The key. The one they've been building. What if it was never about making a new one? What if they were shaping me to be the lock all along? Clay's jaw tightened. Then we stopped them from turning it. How? She snapped, suddenly angry. By shooting at shadows. By burning another house that's already empty. Clay, the locksmith, said it himself. I'm already on the other side. Maybe I never came back after the first time. Maybe I've just been wearing myself. He pulled the truck over fast, tires skidding on the roadside gravel. Turned to her, face sharp with something between rage and pain. You're not one of them. You don't know that. I do. He jabbed a finger at her chest. You still ask questions. You still bleed. You still doubt. That's how I know. She looked away, swallowing the knot in her throat. They're counting on that, she whispered. On my doubt. That's what makes me the keyhole, isn't it? The space that waits to be filled. Clay's voice dropped. Then we seal it. She turned to him. How? He didn't have an answer. Not one he could say aloud. The next pull came just before dawn. Not a hum this time, but a dream. If it even was a dream. Tessa was standing in a white hallway, endless in both directions, lined with mirrors that didn't reflect her. Each one showed a different version of her life. In one, she'd never left Red Hollow. In another, she saw herself cradling something that screamed like a baby, but looked like a shard of glass wrapped in blood. And at the far end of the corridor stood a door made of bone. Not bone carved or shaped, just assembled. A spinal column bent into a frame. Ribcage handles. Teeth across the threshold like a grin waiting to bite. She knew without being told. That was where the key was going. That was the lock's true shape. Her shape. She woke choking on her own scream. Clay was already awake, sitting at the edge of his motel bed, shotgun across his lap. You felt it, she rasped. He nodded. Where is it? He didn't answer with words, just held up a wrinkled scrap of paper. A newspaper clipping. An obituary. No name, no photo. Just a single line: the body was found in perfect condition, yet no reflection could be recovered. Tessa took the paper, fingers trembling. The location, Milbourne, Kentucky. They were less than 50 miles out. The roads got stranger as they neared. More turns than necessary. Dead ends that weren't on any map. Signs pointing both ways. Tessa saw more animals on the road than she should have. Deer that didn't move, just watched. birds that flew in circles over the truck, and in the side mirror, once, she saw a figure sitting in the truck bed, face hidden behind a mirror mask. She didn't tell Clay. By the time they reached Milbourne, the sky had gone sour. The clouds hung low, too still. The town was quiet, but not the way Penhallow had been. This wasn't a silence that smothered. This was a pause. Like the town had exhaled and hadn't taken another breath. The obituary had led them to a funeral home on the edge of town. Old, creaking, windows too clean. Tessa felt it before they stepped inside. The pressure, the familiarity. Like returning to a nightmare you had tried to forget. They entered through the back, found the basement cold and wet with condensation. The mortuary slab still had a white sheet draped across it. Clay peeled it back. Tessa's breath hitched. The body on the table looked like her. Not exactly, but close enough. Same height, same bone structure, same scar above the brow, but the face was smooth. Too smooth, like someone had erased all the fine details, as if this version had been unfinished. Then she saw the cut on its chest, a perfect keyhole. No blood, just empty. "This is it," Tessa whispered. "This is where the key goes." But there was no key. Not yet. Something shifted behind them. They turned. At the far end of the basement, a door opened, slowly, deliberately. Beyond it, only black. From that black, a voice emerged. "You were never meant to be a witness." Tessa stepped forward. "Then why did you leave the mirror open?" A figure stepped into the light, and this time it was her. Perfectly. Down to the mark on her wrist, the weight of her steps, but her eyes were wrong. Too clear. Too knowing. "I didn't," the reflection said. "You broke it." Tessa's head spun. "I don't understand. You made the first crack. The house didn't call you. You knocked. You wanted answers. You opened the door. We just came through." The figure smiled. "You made yourself the keyhole the moment you asked to be more than what you were." Clay raised the shotgun. But the reflection didn't flinch. "You can't kill what isn't born yet," it said. Then it turned and walked back through the door, leaving the keyhole body on the table behind. Waiting, Tessa touched the edge of the slab. Something clicked, deep inside her. Not physical, not pain, just opening. Clay caught her as she staggered, eyes wide. "I felt it," she gasped. "What? The key?" she said, voice barely more than breath. "It's near." And for the first time, she understood what that meant. Not a thing, not an object, a person. Someone out there was carrying the final shape. And when they met, if they met, the lock would turn. And whatever was on the other side wouldn't knock. It would walk through. The sun had vanished hours ago, swallowed by clouds that rolled in thick and too low, blanketing the sky in the same kind of silence you hear right before something strikes. Tessa sat in the passenger seat, staring at the road ahead without blinking. Not because she was tired, but because the second she let herself close her eyes, she'd see her again. The version that wasn't quite her, the mouth that moved with her words, but with none of her soul. That thing hadn't followed them out of the Milbourne funeral home, but Tessa could still feel it pacing behind her ribcage, still hear its echo in the places her thoughts used to be. They drove through the quiet, past empty houses and streets that looked too perfect. Not abandoned, paused, like someone had taken a moment and stretched it over everything, pressing the town into stillness, the way you press glass into a mold. Clay hadn't spoken in miles, but she could feel the words building in him. Tense. Coiled. Waiting for something to break. When he finally spoke, it wasn't what she expected. "Have you thought about what happens if we find the key?" Tessa didn't answer at first. She knew the real question hiding underneath his voice. He wasn't asking about the object anymore. He was asking about the person, because that was the truth now. The key wasn't metal or glass or carved from ancient bone. It was someone. A living, breathing person shaped by the same system that had turned her into the lock. Maybe they didn't even know it. Maybe they were just a kid or a woman or a man with strange dreams and scars they couldn't explain. Someone on the run from their own reflection. Or worse, someone who liked what stared back. She finally said, "If we find them, we don't let them near me." Clay nodded, eyes on the road. "And if they're already looking for you?" The words made the air feel colder. Then the radio in the dashboard flickered. They hadn't turned it on. There were no stations out here. But still, it sputtered to life with a low static hum, soft at first, then louder. Then came a voice, cracked and distant, like it was leaking from the back of a broken throat. "Tessa." One word. No more. She turned slowly, staring at the radio like it had grown teeth. Clay reached out to turn the dial, but the static spiked and screamed. The lights on the dashboard flickered, the truck lurched, and the voice came again, calm this time. Too calm. "Let me in." Tessa shoved her fist into the dash, shattering the face of the radio, cutting off the voice in a hiss of broken circuitry. Silence returned, but it wasn't real. It crouched in the corners of the truck, waiting to speak again. The message was clear. The key was close, and it was awake. By dawn, they reached a town that didn't appear on the GPS, a single road with 6 houses and a church with no cross. The town sign had no name, just a number, 96. Tessa stepped out of the truck and her knees buckled, not from weakness, from resonance. The hum she'd been tracking since Silver Mare now throbbed with an unbearable clarity. Her fingertips twitched. Her skin itched. The world around her vibrated like a tuning fork struck too hard. "It's here," she said, voice low. Clay looked around. "What is this place?" Tessa turned in a slow circle. A mirror, pretending to be a town. They moved cautiously, passing houses with windows painted black from the inside, curtains drawn. Front door slightly ajar but never open. It felt lived in, but nothing stirred. No dogs barking, no birds. Just the stillness of a place watching its own shadow. The church sat at the end of the road. Its windows were intact, but the glass had no reflection. The front door hung open. The smell that rolled out wasn't rot or incense or dust. It was colder than that, empty. Inside, the pews were filled, but not with people, with mannequins. Dozens of them sitting in perfect posture, no faces, just blank heads turned toward the altar. And on that altar, kneeling, was a person, a boy, no older than 17, head bowed, hands open, eyes closed. Tessa took one step forward and felt the air snap. The mannequins turned in unison, necks grinding, joints creaking. Not to face Clay. Not to face the door. To face her. Clay raised his weapon, ready to fire, but Tessa raised a hand. "Don't," she whispered. "They're not the threat." She walked slowly down the aisle. The boy didn't move. She could see now. His chest glowed faintly beneath his shirt. A soft pulse. The same kind of pulse that once ran through the house's mirrored roots. His breath was steady, not afraid, not asleep, ready. "Tessa," Clay warned behind her, but she couldn't stop. The closer she got, the more she felt it. He was the key, not by accident, not by torture, not by infection. He was made, born and shaped and left here like a sword in a stone, waiting for the lock to arrive. She stood at the foot of the altar. He opened his eyes and smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just inevitably. "I've been waiting," he said. Tessa's throat tightened. "Do you know what you are?" He nodded once. "Do you?" She flinched. He stood slowly, not aggressive, not hostile, just rising like a tide. "They left me here when I was 5, he said. "No name, no past. Just dreams. I see everything, every mirror, every house. I am the thread that connects them." He stepped down the altar stairs, and Tessa's legs locked. Her chest burned. Every part of her ached with the pull of him. "I don't want this," she gasped. "But you are it," he said. "The lock that breaks the world." "I'm just the match." He reached out. Tessa backed away. Clay stepped forward, gun raised. "Touch her," he warned, "and I'll blow a hole in your spine." The boy didn't stop. "I don't need to touch her," he said softly. "I just have to see her." And then their eyes met, and the world split. Tessa screamed as her knees hit the church floor. Every part of her mind was being read, not ripped, not broken, just turned, like a key in a lock, slow and smooth and inevitable. Memories surged forward. Red Hollow, the mirror in the treehouse. The first time she saw her reflection blink when she didn't. Silver mirror, Pen Hollow. The girl in the barn. The dead version of herself on the slab. Each one a tooth in the key. Each one a click, until she heard it. The lock turning. Clay shouted her name. Fired the gun. But the bullet hung in the air. Frozen. Reality bent around them like a lens warping under heat. And the boy opened. Not his mouth. Not his hands. His chest. From the center of his sternum, light exploded. Not blinding, not hot, but alive. A mirror turned inside out. A reflection of everything that had ever looked back. And within it, Tessa saw herself, smiling. Not in defiance. In welcome. Then, darkness. Not unconsciousness. Not death. Just the other side. There was no falling this time. No wind, no scream, no sense of motion. Just the immediate, absolute absence of everything. Not blackness. Not void. Something worse. A feeling like being erased, line by line, memory by memory, until nothing remained but shape, and even that wasn't stable. Tessa wasn't sure she had eyes, but somehow she could still see. Not colors or light, but patterns. Endless repetitions of pain, joy, loss, hope, human emotion, stretched into infinite, spiraling glass forms. Fractals made of feelings, humming with reflections that weren't her own. Somewhere within this place, a voice spoke. Not aloud, but inside her. Welcome home. It wasn't a greeting. It was a verdict. Tessa tried to scream, but nothing came out. The sound didn't exist here. Language bent backward. Thought rebounded against the walls of her skull like a trapped animal. But something was inside with her. Watching. Listening. Not the boy. Not the house. Something older. The source that had built both. The architect. It didn't wear a face. It didn't need one. It was presence. Layered over her, under her, through her. It took her memories the way a fire takes oxygen. Slowly, then all at once. Not to destroy them, but to catalog them. Clay's voice. The feel of her mother's hands braiding her hair. The first time she bled. The first time she saw a reflection that didn't move when she did. Each moment pulled like thread from her chest, spinning out and weaving into the mirror storm around her. And still, the voice whispered. You broke the seal. You opened the lock. Now see what lies behind it. Suddenly, Tessa felt ground beneath her feet. Weight returned to her limbs. Pain followed, sharp and immediate. Like her body had remembered its limits all at once. She fell to her knees, gasping. Air burned her lungs. Gravity crushed her bones. But she was alive. The place she stood in looked almost like a world. But not quite. A city, maybe. Skyscrapers that twisted into impossible angles. Streets paved with smooth, silver glass. People walked along the edges, faceless, seamless, unaware, or uncaring that they weren't whole. Above, a sky churned like molten mirror. Clouds shaped like broken memories. The sun, if there was one, was a smear of light without direction. She was inside the system. Not just inside, integrated. The moment she understood that, something responded. The structures around her began to ripple, the glass towers breathing like lungs. Shapes formed in the reflection on the pavement. Hers, but twisted. Tessa at different ages, doing things she never did, killing people she never met, smiling at horrors she'd never known. Stop, she croaked. But the visions multiplied. Her not self surrounded her now, circling like sharks. All the versions the house might have made, had it succeeded fully. One whispered to a corpse. One tore at her own skin with fingernails sharpened to bone. One simply watched, head tilted, smiling with eyes made of obsidian. You are the sum of all your almosts, they said in unison. And you are ripe. Tessa stood. Blood dripped from her nose. Her hands trembled. But she was herself. That much she clung to like a blade. No, she rasped. I am what survived. The reflections shrieked, recoiling. Some shattered. Some fled into the walls. Some collapsed into the street like glass statues dropped from a height. The world around her flickered, cracked, and then the architect spoke again, not with a voice, but with a memory. Clay, standing over her, yelling her name. The gun in his hand. The boy, the key, collapsing in light. Something had gone wrong. The lock turned, yes, but the door hadn't opened all the way, and now, something was jamming it. Tessa. She wasn't a vessel. She was a knot. A tangle in the system that the architect hadn't accounted for. So it did what all systems do when faced with a problem. It tried to rewrite her. From the mirrored air around her, hands emerged. Dozens, hundreds, not human hands, smooth, white, too many joints. They reached for her face, her chest, her eyes. Tessa closed her fists. The shard was still there. It didn't belong to this place. It was forged outside the mirror, in the heat of real memory and pain. And it still cut. She swung. The first hand severed. No blood, just light. She ran. Down the mirrored streets, through alleys that shifted behind her, chased by the architect's fury. The city screamed. Buildings folded in on themselves. Shadows peeled off the ground and reached with jaws instead of arms. But she kept running. She didn't need a way out. She needed a way deeper, because somewhere in this place was the key. The real key. Not the boy, not a person. The idea of him, the code that shaped him, the blueprint. She turned a corner and there it was, a tower, blacker than the rest. Windowless, not mirrored, just solid. And from within it, she felt it. Her heartbeat. Not metaphorical. Real. She was the lock, yes. But that thing inside, that was the part of her they had stolen. Her center. She climbed. Every step was pain. Every stair shifted. Gravity reversed, bent sideways, screamed in shapes instead of sounds. But she climbed, shard in one hand, memory in the other. At the top of the tower was a chamber of light. Floating inside it, no ground, no walls, was a shape. A mirror. But not reflective. Instead, it absorbed, and inside it pulsed something like a heart. She knew instantly. This was what had been taken from her. The piece the architect had carved out. The emptiness she'd carried all her life. The hollow place where meaning should have gone. Tessa stepped forward. "Give it back," she whispered. The mirror pulsed. It didn't speak, but it refused. It flashed with images. Clay dead. Tara screaming. Her mother sobbing in a mirror. All the lives she could have had, all the griefs she might have avoided, if she just surrendered. The promise was simple: accept the design. Stop fighting the system. Become what you were meant to. But she wasn't meant for this. She was meant to break it. Tessa raised the shard, not to strike, to press it into her own chest, directly over the space that ached, the keyhole. And as the shard touched skin, the tower exploded in light. The system screamed. The lock refused. And for the first time, the architect broke. Tessa opened her eyes. She was in Clay's arms. The church was ash. The boy was gone. And from the wound in her chest, the mirror heart pulsed. But it was hers now. No longer a lock, no longer a door, just a weapon. And the house, it knew. And it was afraid. Clay had seen many kinds of wounds. Flesh torn by claws, jagged glass embedded deep, the kind of trauma that leaves trails. But nothing prepared him for the wound Tessa carried when she came back. There was no blood, no bruising, no visible break in her skin. But it pulsed. Right over her heart, a faint rhythm like a heartbeat that wasn't hers, thudding with impossible resonance. He had his arms around her when she came to, and for a moment, she looked at him like she didn't know his face. Then she blinked, and he saw it, the old Tessa flickering beneath a layer of something terrifyingly new. He didn't ask what she'd seen. He didn't ask how she came back. He just said, "We need to move," and she nodded, silent. Eyes fixed somewhere far past the charred remains of the church, staring into a depth only she could see. When they returned to the truck, the keys were still in the ignition, engine idling like it had never stopped. Clay slid behind the wheel, but Tessa hesitated. She looked into the passenger side mirror, which for once reflected only her. just her. Pale, hollow-eyed, and breathing. Then it blinked. She flinched away as the image in the glass smiled, not cruelly, not even with malice, but with a sick, slow certainty. It was like looking at your future self waving from the gallows. The mirror cracked down the center, spider-webbing from the mouth of that smile, and in its silence, Tessa heard something whisper. You brought it back. The drive was silent. Tessa didn't tell Clay that the mirror shard was gone, that when she pressed it into her chest, it didn't wound her. It merged. She had felt it melt into her skin, felt it unlock something inside. A vault she didn't know she had. Now, every breath felt too deep. Every heartbeat echoed. She could feel the architecture of the house pulsing somewhere behind her thoughts. Not words, not voices, just awareness. Like the walls of reality were pressing inward slightly, leaning too close. 3 towns later, they stopped at a gas station off Route 15, the kind with a buzzing sign and a flickering security camera that pointed nowhere. Clay filled up while Tessa went inside. The air was stale. Music played from a speaker in the ceiling, but it was warped. Notes bending, lyrics reversed. She moved to the counter and saw the clerk staring into a small makeup mirror beside the register. Tessa, he whispered, not looking at her. She froze. What did you say? He blinked slowly, tears rolling down his cheeks. She sees you now. Tessa stepped forward. Who? He turned the mirror toward her. But it didn't show her. It showed her room, back in Red Hollow. The one she hadn't seen since she was 15. The bed with the twisted quilt. The cracked ceiling tile above the window. The wooden floor with that burn mark near the corner. And sitting on the edge of the bed was Tara. Alive, looking directly at her. Tessa. Tara's voice came through the mirror, fragile as glass. Tessa staggered back, heart thundering. Clay rushed in just in time to catch her. She's alive, Tessa gasped, grabbing his shirt. Tara's alive. She's in the room. My old room. Clay looked at the mirror. It was blank now, just her reflection. Still shaking, Tessa turned to the clerk. What did you see? She demanded. But his eyes were empty. Literally. 2 polished surfaces where his irises should have been. Small, round mirrors set into his skull. He smiled. They're bleeding through, he said. Then dropped to the floor, convulsing. Blood ran from his nose, his mouth, his ears. But what stained the tile wasn't red. It was silver. Clay pulled her away. They ran to the truck. They didn't speak until they were miles down the highway. What if it's not over? Tessa whispered. What if I didn't break the house? What if I just made a window? Clay kept his eyes on the road. Then we find Tara and we close it. But Tessa shook her head. That's the thing. The house wasn't a place. It was a barrier. A border. It kept the architect in. All the mirrors, all the twisted towns. They weren't for us. They were to keep it from slipping through. Clay's jaw clenched. Then breaking the lock. Opened the gate, she finished. And now it's bleeding. That night the dreams returned, not hers. Clay's. He saw her. But not how she was. He saw her standing in a mirrored cathedral, wearing black robes that shimmered like obsidian water. Around her were others, hundreds, kneeling, each with mirrors where faces should have been. She lifted her arms and sang. The walls trembled, reality cracked, and from the rift came something. Clay woke, drenched in sweat, the echo of that song still ringing in his ears. Tessa sat beside him. I saw it too, she said. Was it a dream? No, she said. It was a warning. The next morning, the sky was wrong. Too smooth, too still. Clouds didn't move. Birds flew in loops. People smiled with the wrong teeth. They'd bled too far already. The house was gone. But the echoes remained. In every mirror. In every silence. In every place where reflection meant something. Tessa stood in front of a cracked mirror in a diner that hadn't seen customers in years and placed her hand against the glass. Her palm shimmered. The surface bent inward slightly, not enough to pull her through, but enough to whisper back, I am awake. Clay looked at her. Who said that? She turned slowly, eyes cold. Not who, she said. What? And the mirror cracked again. This time, not from her, but from the inside. There's a moment when the world tips, just slightly. Not enough for most to notice, but enough for those attuned to it to feel something shift. That was the sensation pressing into Tessa's bones as she stood at the edge of the diner parking lot, staring at the sky that no longer obeyed gravity. The clouds didn't move. They pulsed, as if something enormous, and just beneath them was breathing in time with her heartbeat. Clay leaned against the truck, shotgun in his lap, cigarette burning to ash between his fingers, untouched. He wasn't smoking for calm. He was smoking to keep his hands busy, because if he let them go still for too long, he'd have to face what they'd both started to realize. The world was changing, and it wasn't waiting for permission. Tessa walked slowly back toward the truck, her shadow stretching unnaturally behind her, refusing to match her pace. In the reflection of the truck's windows, her eyes were glass. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Glass. She blinked, and they returned to normal. Or they appeared to. The part of her that had been opened in that tower still hummed, low and constant. A second pulse beneath her skin. It wasn't a wound. It wasn't even a power. It was a thread, and something on the other end was pulling. Clay saw it too. Not the eyes, not the hum, but the distance. The way Tessa stood a little straighter now, as if gravity didn't quite grip her the same way. He wanted to believe she was still fighting, that the girl who had walked into the first mirror was still buried somewhere behind the pale skin and cracked voice. But more and more, he couldn't tell if she was guiding them forward or being led by something else entirely. That night, they stopped in a nowhere town with no lights and no name. The motel was the kind that sold rooms by the hour, the kind where you didn't ask questions because the answers were too heavy. Tessa barely slept, not because of dreams, but because dreams couldn't find her anymore. She had moved past them, slipped into a space where rest was impossible, because rest meant peace, and nothing inside her was peaceful anymore. At 3:07 a.m., she sat up suddenly. Clay was already awake, sitting in the chair by the window. "You felt it too?" she asked. He didn't nod. Didn't move, just said, "Behind the church. The broken steeple." Tessa stood. "It's calling again." They left the motel before the world could catch up. The church was real, but just barely. It leaned sideways. Its bell cracked down the middle like a skull. The yard behind it was overgrown, tangled with weeds that pulsed faintly in the moonlight. Tessa stepped through them, letting their thorns drag across her arms. They didn't cut her. They parted, as if they recognized her. At the back of the church was a stone archway with nothing behind it. No door, just air. But that wasn't the truth. The truth shimmered faintly when she tilted her head, the air behind the arch rippling like heat. She reached out and touched it. The world convulsed. Clay staggered, catching himself against the wall. The wind kicked up. The stars blinked out one by one. And from the arch, a scream came, not loud, not human. A sound like metal being bent by grief. Tessa stepped back. "They're testing the gates," she said. "Who?" Clay asked, voice strained. "The echoes," she whispered. "Not the architect. Not the house. The pieces. The fragments that blood through when I cracked the lock." As if to confirm her words, the air around them began to shimmer with reflections. But there were no mirrors. Just space. And yet, in every direction, they saw themselves. Tessa with hollow eyes and hands too long. Clay with skin peeled back to show gears where veins should be. Versions of them that had made different choices. Let the house win. Let the doors open. "Don't look," Tessa said. "They're not real." But Clay's reflection smiled at him and whispered, "You left her once. You'll do it again." Clay stepped back, breath quickening. Tessa grabbed his hand. "They're baiting us, trying to rewrite us." The reflections flickered, then vanished. The sky returned. The wind stopped, but the arch remained. Tessa stared at it, jaw clenched. "It's not just one gate anymore," she said. There are hundreds, thousands, cracks in the mirrors, slits in the air, and something is crawling through. Clay looked at her. Can we stop it? I don't know, she said, but we can slow it, and maybe we can trap it. The next day, they followed the roads the way you follow threads through a knot. Backward, tangled, desperate. They didn't know the destination, only that it pulled. By dusk, they found themselves in a town that didn't echo, didn't shimmer, didn't bend. It was real, raw, human. The people here looked tired but real. The mirrors didn't move. The reflections didn't smile. And for the first time in days, Tessa felt alone in her own skin. Until they met the girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. Freckles, green eyes, pale hair. She sat on a porch swing, staring at the sky with a frown that didn't belong on a child. When she saw Tessa, she stood and walked over, barefoot on gravel, eyes locked onto hers like magnets. You're the lock, the girl said, but I'm the echo. Tessa knelt. What's your name? The girl shrugged. I don't have one. They forgot to give me one when I came through. Tessa's stomach turned. You're from the other side. The girl nodded. I didn't want to be, but something pushed me through. Said I was a test. Said if the world held me without cracking, they'd send more. Clay knelt beside her. Are there others like you? The girl nodded again. But most of them don't last. The world rejects them. They rot, bleed silver, burn from the inside. Tessa swallowed hard. Why haven't you? The girl looked at her. You opened the door, she said simply. That means I belong. And then she smiled, not cruelly, not sweetly, just knowingly. Like someone who'd seen the blueprint from the other side and understood that the collapse wasn't a matter of if. Only when. Tessa stood. We have to warn the others. Clay frowned. Who? She looked up at the sky, now streaked with faint lines of mirror light. Everyone. The world wasn't ending with a bang. It was ending with a mirror shattering one hairline crack at a time, and only the people who had seen the house, or carried its echo inside them, knew the sound it made. It was quiet, almost kind, like glass sighing as it gave in to pressure too deep to measure. Tessa knew that sound now. She heard it everywhere. In the hum of fluorescent lights at the gas station, in the slow flicker of highway signs, in the way reflections now took just a second too long to respond. Clay noticed it too. He didn't say it out loud, but he watched her constantly now, like he was waiting for something in her to go still, not out of fear, not out of distrust, but because if she stopped moving, he wasn't sure the world would keep spinning. The girl from the porch, who still refused to give a name, sat in the truck's back seat with her legs tucked underneath her, humming tunelessly to herself. Sometimes she would speak, out of nowhere, and say things like, "That tree used to scream," or "Don't look at the moon tonight." Tessa listened carefully, filing it all away, because every word she said carried the weight of something ancient trying to pass as human. They followed the pulse. That was the only word that fit, a slow, rhythmic pull they all felt under their feet, like the earth itself was breathing. Not deeply, not fully, but enough to shift the gravel beneath their boots. It led them into the hills outside of Linemont. Forests that used to be state parks, now half burned and empty. The trees leaned wrong. The shadows didn't line up with the sun. Tessa stepped over a creek and saw her reflection in the water pause, smile, and then vanish. By sundown, they reached the heart of the hills. A clearing. Dead center stood a wooden house. Not the house, but something close. The wood was darker, older. It looked like it had been grown, not built. No windows, no door. Just 4 walls and a roof that slanted like a head tilted in thought. The girl climbed out of the truck first and walked straight to it. They left the first key here, she said, placing her hand on the outer wall, the original pattern, before they started making people. Tessa's blood ran cold. You mean, before me? The girl nodded. This house is the shape they used. They carved the idea of the lock out of this place. Then they started imprinting it onto minds. Onto you. Clay stepped forward. So this is ground zero. No, the girl said. This is below ground zero. You want to stop the bleeding. You have to go under it. You have to see what they buried. The house moaned. Not the wood, the space. Like reality itself was groaning under the weight of something pressing against it from beneath. Tessa felt it in her teeth, in her spine. She took one step toward the wall, and it opened. No hinges, no movement. One moment it was solid wood, the next it was gone. Inside only darkness, and the pulse. Louder now, steadier, like a countdown. They didn't speak. There was no point. Whatever was under that house had been waiting longer than language. Inside, it was cold. Not in temperature, cold in intention. The walls were smooth, featureless, yet watching. Every step echoed. The floor sloped downward, pulling them deeper. The girl followed silently, her eyes wide, but not afraid. More like she was remembering a dream she hadn't had yet. They reached the base, a chamber. Carved stone. Symbols etched into every surface, familiar ones. The same symbols Tessa had seen burned into her skin. But here they weren't just marks. They moved, shifted, spelled new things each time she blinked. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, on it a mirror, cracked, bleeding light. The pulse came from it, not through it, from it, like a heart. Tessa stepped close. Clay held her back. Wait, but she shook her head. This is it. This is where they wrote me. Not my name. My shape. They carved me out of this reflection. And they carved others too. The girl touched the mirror. It screamed. High and shrill like feedback from the other side of the veil. The symbols lit up. The air grew thick. And then they saw them. Shapes moving in the mirror. Not people. Not exactly. Reflections that had never found bodies. Locked behind the glass. Trapped between form and thought. One of them pressed against the inside. It looked like clay. But it had no eyes. Just dark holes filled with stars. Why does it look like me? Clay whispered. The girl answered. They tried to make more. Not just locks, guards. Not just people. Patterns. Tessa's knees gave out. The light was pouring into her now. Not burning. Infusing. The mirror knew her. It remembered her, and it wanted her back. She screamed as it pulled. Not her body. Herself. Clay fired. The sound shattered the symbols. The light went out. Tessa collapsed. The mirror cracked fully. And the chamber shook. The girl grabbed Clay's arm. Run. They didn't ask. They didn't hesitate. They ran. Up the slope. Through the silent house, out into the cold, wrong night. Behind them, the house didn't burn. It inhaled. The trees bent inward. The wind screamed backward. And the earth rumbled with something ancient waking up. Tessa lay on the ground, convulsing. Her veins shimmered faintly. And from her lips came a whisper. I saw where they come from. Clay leaned close. What did you see? Tessa looked up, tears running sideways down her face. A city made of mouths, she said, and every one of them knew my name. The night didn't end. It only changed shape. The stars above Linemont were wrong now, rearranged like symbols in a forgotten language. They didn't twinkle, they watched. And as Clay carried Tessa back to the truck, her skin still shimmering with faint silver threads pulsing beneath the surface, he realized something terrible. Whatever they'd seen beneath, that twisted house hadn't just shown itself. It had tethered itself. It had reached through the mirror, not to grab her body, but to leave a mark, a brand, not on the skin, on the soul. Tessa awoke with a start, gasping for air as if she'd drowned. Her eyes darted across the cab of the truck, not seeing him at first, as if she was scanning some invisible grid overlaid on the world. Clay touched her arm, and she flinched. Not out of fear, but instinct, like something inside her didn't recognize touch anymore. It's louder now, she whispered, her voice hoarse and full of gravel. The house wasn't the beginning. It was just the first room. Clay stared at her. What did you see? She leaned forward, burying her face in her hands. When she looked up, her expression was hollow, trembling with truth too big for words. A city, she said. A place where mirrors are grown like vines, twisted through bone and ash. Streets made of breath, towers made of thought, and mouths clay. Endless mouths on every wall, not speaking, whispering. They were whispering my name. Clay felt it then too, like the air had thickened. The mirrors hadn't just been portals or eyes or reflections. They were seeds. Planted here, decades ago, maybe longer, by something not interested in conquering the world but rewriting it. Making it match what it saw in its own image. And now that Tessa had survived their design, they were waking up to finish the job. He started the truck, but the radio turned on by itself. No static, no music, just breathing. Then a voice, but not one they recognized. It was Clay's. "I left her once," it said. "And I'll do it again." Tessa snapped toward the speaker. "Turn it off." He yanked the knob. No change. The voice kept repeating over and over until it was joined by a chorus. Her voice. Tara's. His father's. A storm of voices repeating fragmented memories, like a song written by a broken mind. Tessa slammed her fist into the dashboard. Silence. Then the air inside the truck went cold. Outside, the mist rolled in, thick and fast. Clay stepped out, gun in hand. But it wasn't a threat he could shoot. The mist itself moved. It didn't drift. It slid with purpose, coiling through the trees and wrapping around the road like a noose. Shapes flickered inside it. People, shaped, but blurred. As if drawn in the wrong dimension. Tessa stood at the edge of it. "They're trying to drag us back." "To the city?" She shook her head. "No. To the part of the world that's already bent. The places where the mirrors breathed first. We were never meant to leave Penhollow. That town wasn't haunted. It was infected." The mist reached the hood of the truck. A hand pressed into the condensation on the windshield. 5 fingers, too long, tipped with nails like needles. Tessa stepped toward it. The fingers tapped once, twice, then all 5 slammed into the glass. The windshield didn't crack, it rippled. Then it breathed. As if the truck itself had become a lung, gasping in air that wasn't there. Tessa pulled the mirror shard from her coat. It still glowed faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She didn't think. She reacted, plunging it into the breathing glass. A scream tore through the fog. The air shattered, not in sound, in structure. And just like that, the mist collapsed inward. "Gone." Clay coughed, gripping the door, eyes wide. "What did you do?" Tessa looked at the shard. It no longer pulsed. It had turned black. Spent. "I cut it off," she said. "Whatever part of the system had infected this place. I severed it. But I don't know how long that'll last." He looked around. The trees were still wrong. The moon too low. But the air wasn't watching anymore. "You said the city has streets made of breath," he murmured. "What does that even mean?" Tessa sat down on the road, hands in her lap, staring into the night like it might open another door. "It means the place itself is alive, and every breath we take pulls us closer to it. The more we see, the more we remember, the more we become part of the code. It's rewriting the world slowly, piece by piece. I don't know how much longer I can resist." Clay sat beside her. "You're not alone," he said. She turned her head toward him. "No," she said. "I'm not. That's why they're afraid." And behind her eyes, something smiled. Not the architect, not the house, Tessa. The part of her that wasn't a lock anymore. The part that had seen the mouths and didn't blink. By morning, the road behind them had vanished, not just in the way fog obscures a path, or in the way a forest can grow back and reclaim its asphalt. No, this was cleaner, more surgical. A perfect erasure of direction, as though the road had never been built, as though it had been unwritten from the earth itself. Tessa stared at the horizon, where memory no longer matched matter, and said nothing. Clay leaned against the truck, tightening the strap of his backpack, and stared at her like he was trying to count how many pieces of her were still real. They kept moving. Not forward, not backward, but in a direction that didn't fit any compass. The girl, still unnamed, still humming, walked a few paces ahead of them, her bare feet never making a sound. The trees around them began to thin, replaced by black soil and strange growths that glimmered faintly even without light. It wasn't just landscape anymore. It was residue. Like the world itself was sweating out the infection. They found the building just past noon, a two-story structure rising from the dead earth like a broken tooth, concrete, cracked, and buried halfway beneath the ground. There were no signs, no fences, no reason for it to exist. But Tessa knew it the moment she saw it. "This is where they stored the first blueprints," she whispered. Clay looked at her, brow tight. "Blueprints for what?" She touched the wall. "For us." The door wasn't locked. It didn't even have a handle. It simply swung open when she touched it, releasing a breath of air so cold it cut. They stepped inside, and immediately the air went still, as if sound had been outlawed. No echoes, no creaks, just the sensation of being watched by walls too old to remember their purpose. The lobby had no furniture, just dust, the kind of dust that doesn't fall. It grows. Tessa moved through it like she'd been here before, and maybe she had. Not in body, but in blueprint. Her skin prickled as they passed door after door, each unmarked, each sealed. Finally, they reached a long hallway that bent downward at a slope too subtle to notice unless you were paying attention. Clay stopped. "What are we even looking for?" Tessa didn't answer right away. Then, the original room. The house. No, older. The one the house copied. They reached the bottom of the slope and found a steel door, rusted shut. The girl stepped forward, touched it once, and it dissolved. Not broke. Not opened. Dissolved into black flakes that floated upward and vanished like ash. Inside was a chamber that hurt to look at. There was no floor, no ceiling, just space, folded and refolded until geometry gave up. The walls pulsed, covered in script too ancient to translate and too modern to understand. In the center floated a table. On it a folder. Clay stared. "That's it?" Tessa nodded. He stepped forward and picked it up. Inside were photographs of Tessa, not as she was, as she had never been. One showed her in a school uniform, standing outside a brick building that didn't exist. Another showed her smiling beside a mother who wasn't hers. One more had her shaking hands with a mirror image of herself in a white corridor labeled Observation Room B. "None of this happened," Clay muttered. Tessa took the folder and flipped to the last page. There, printed in faded red ink, were the words Lock Variant 037B, Past Emotional Assimilation. Commence integration into civilian structure. Her hands trembled. "I'm not the first." Clay placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, but maybe you're the last." The walls around them groaned. The building had recognized its intruders. Tessa turned to the girl. "We need to get out. Now." But the girl wasn't moving. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking. And for the first time she looked scared. "They're here." "Who?" Clay asked. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she lifted a finger and pointed to the nearest wall, where shadows had begun to gather. Not grow, not fall. Gather, like reflections with nowhere to go. Then they stepped forward, figures, human, shaped, skinless and mirror-faced. Their heads tilted at impossible angles, their mouths stitched shut, but whispering anyway. Their failed variants, the girl said, voice hollow. They weren't erased, just locked away. The figures moved fast. Clay raised his weapon, fired. The bullet passed through one and didn't exit. It simply vanished. "No more fighting," Tessa said. "It's not about that anymore." She stepped forward. The mirror-faced thing stopped. She lifted the shard, now cold, now dormant, and pressed it to her chest. A faint hum, a flicker, and then her body lit up from within. The figures fell to their knees, not in pain, in recognition. Tessa looked at them, not with pity, not with rage, but with something worse: acceptance. "I know what I am now," she said, "and I know why you're broken." The walls began to collapse. The building wasn't falling. It was being rewritten, from the inside out. Clay grabbed her hand. "We have to go." They ran, up the slope, through the lobby, out into the strange air of the dead forest. The building folded behind them, and vanished. Not exploded, not crumbled, vanished. The girl looked at Tessa with wide eyes. "They'll come faster now." "I know," Tessa said. She looked at her hands, at the veins still glowing beneath the skin, at the memories she'd never lived now living inside her. "They'll come," she repeated, "but I'll be waiting." By the time they reached the next town, the world had changed again. Not visibly, not like the buildings were crumbling or the sky was falling, but in the way everything felt. The air tasted metallic. Light bent wrong around corners. People walked slower, spoke softer, and glanced nervously at their own reflections as if something inside the mirrors might finally blink first. Tessa sat in the passenger seat, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. Clay knew better than to interrupt her when she was like this. He'd come to understand the silence wasn't absence. It was calculation. Listening. Something inside her was hearing things they couldn't, and now, more often than not, her voice came out of that space. Slow, deliberate, like each word was trying to navigate a maze before escaping her mouth. The town was called West Mora. It wasn't on any map Clay could find. The signs leading into it were handwritten, and no one in the gas station could remember when they'd last seen a stranger. There were no mirrors in the entire town. Not one. Not in bathrooms. Not in stores. Not in car side panels. Every reflective surface had been removed, shattered, or hidden. And when Tessa asked the man behind the counter about it, he just stared at her with haunted eyes and said, "It's better that way." They stayed in an old boarding house run by a woman named Marnie, who looked like she hadn't slept since the last war. Her hands trembled when she passed Tessa the key, and when their fingers touched, she flinched as if burned. Later that night, as Clay walked the creaking floorboards of the hallway, he passed a door that should have been locked. It wasn't. It swung open slowly, and behind it was a room filled with hundreds of drawings. Every wall, floorboard, ceiling tile was covered. Not scribbles, not madness, portraits, and they were all of Tessa. Every single one. Some younger, some older, some twisted, some gentle, but always her, always the same eyes. And always standing beside some version of the house. Crooked, shadowed, looming in the background. Clay stepped back into the hallway, heart thudding. Tessa was already there. "I know," she said. He didn't ask how. "I'm leaking," she continued. "Into the system. Into the cracks. People dream of me now. Even if they've never met me. The house imprinted me into the code, so deeply that I've become recurring." Clay looked back into the room. "Then what the hell are we supposed to do?" Tessa's eyes were glass again, not reflective, just empty. "I need to go further, deeper, to the places where they stored the names." He frowned. "Names," she nodded. "The ones they forgot. The ones they erased to make room for me." That night, they didn't sleep. They walked through West Mora's deserted downtown, passing shuttered shops and boarded windows. In the center of town was an old courthouse. It had no roof, just 4 crumbling pillars and a staircase that led nowhere. But beneath it, there was something else. The ground was scorched in a perfect circle, and as they approached, the girls who still refused to name herself knelt down and placed her ear to the soil. "They're still talking," she whispered. "Who?" Clay asked. She looked up. "The lost ones." And then the ground answered. It didn't break open. It peeled. Like skin pulled back from bone. Beneath it, stone stairs spiraling downward. No torches. No light. Just the smell of old metal and the weight of silence that had waited too long to be noticed. Tessa stepped first. Then the girl. Then Clay. They descended in quiet, each step heavier than the last. At the bottom was a room. It had no walls. Just shelves, miles high and miles long. And on those shelves, mirrors. Not glass, not metal, just surfaces. Like water caught in a scream. Each one humming faintly, each one whispering. Tessa approached the first. The reflection didn't show her face. It showed a woman. Young, eyes stitched shut, mouth open in a silent laugh. Her voice echoed in the room. They took my name and fed it to the lock. Tessa stepped back. Clay grabbed her arm. What is this place? She turned to him, voice shaking. This is where they stored the overwritten lives. The ones they used to build the framework. They didn't just design me. They replaced someone to make room. More whispers now. The shelves began to vibrate. Mirrors flickering with scenes of other lives, other homes, other families, fractured, displaced, erased. And in every one, a piece of Tessa, her laugh, her walk, her voice. It's all borrowed, she whispered. I'm a college, a patchwork. The girl stepped forward, pointed at one mirror. That one, she said. Tessa approached. This time the reflection was her, but with different eyes, softer, wounded. She looked happy. Tessa placed her hand on the surface. The mirror didn't break, it opened. A breeze swept through the chamber. Cold, sore. Behind the glass another room, not stone, not metal, just a white space, sterile, humming, with a table and a folder. Inside it a single line, subject Zausener 37B clearance revoked. Initiate deletion. Clay read over her shoulder. They tried to erase you. Tessa smiled for the first time in hours. They failed. And somewhere deep in the mirrors, something screamed. They didn't climb the stairs back up. They rose. Not in the way bodies do under their own strength, but as if the space below had rejected them. Spit them upward through layers of history, too distorted to hold them anymore. One blink. They were underground. The next, they were back in the courthouse ruins, breathing hard in the cold night air. West Mora was no longer asleep. Lights flickered behind windows that hadn't held electricity in decades. Shadows leaned against porch rails like drunk memories, whispering in voices that didn't match their shapes. Tessa stood still, listening. The names, the stolen names, they were still echoing, not just from below, but from within. They remember me, she said, her voice barely more than breath. All the pieces they carved to make me. They're still awake, and they want to be whole again. Clay didn't know what that meant. Not fully, but he understood what it implied. Tessa wasn't just changing. She was merging. Her identity, her body, her mind. None of it had ever belonged to her alone. Not truly. She'd been built like a room, not to live in, to hold something. And now all the echoes, the ghosts of stolen lives and forgotten thoughts, were pressing in, wanting their due. Is that even possible? He asked. Can you hold all of them? Tessa turned toward him. Her pupils weren't black anymore. They were mirror sharp, but her voice was still hers. I have to, she said. Because if I don't, they'll come through one by one, dragging their own cracks behind them. It won't be just me. It'll be copies. Thousands of them. Versions of people who never had the chance to live. And they won't care what they break to get out. The girl, silent for most of the walk, tugged on Tessa's sleeve. There's one more place, she said. The one they buried deepest. Not below. Not above. Inside. Tessa frowned. Inside what? The girl didn't answer. She just pointed at Tessa's chest. And Tessa understood. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't symbolism. It was literal. The house, the copies, the original plans, it was all pointing toward something that had been implanted in her. A final key. The fail-safe. The door within the door. It had never been about finding it. It had been about waking it up. They returned to the truck, but it no longer started. Not because of damage. Because it didn't exist anymore. It was still there in shape, in silhouette, but when Clay tried to open the driver's side door, his hand passed through like it was made of fog. They're fading it out, he said. They're thinning the real, Tessa replied. Anything that keeps us moving forward. They'll remove it, one piece at a time. So they walked. Marnie from the boarding house was standing in the middle of the street when they passed, wearing a nightgown soaked through with sweat. Her eyes were silver. Her mouth was sewn shut with thread that shimmered when it caught the moonlight. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. She just stood, watching. And behind her every window in West Mora was lit. Every house, every room. And behind every glass pane reflections that weren't right. People smiling when no one was in the room. Hands pressing from the inside of the glass. The entire town had become a trap. Not for them. For Tessa. "They're calling you home," Clay said, voice low. "No," she replied. "They're calling me back." The girl led them toward the edge of town, where the forest took over again. Trees tall and hungry, roots like veins. They walked until they reached a clearing. In its center stood something impossible. Not a building, not a ruin, a frame, rough, wooden, 8 feet tall. No walls, no base, just 4 sides of rotted timber standing like an open doorway. It hummed. Tessa approached slowly, the girl behind her, hands still holding that silent tune she always hummed when things turned. The air around the frame was dense, not like fog, like memory. Tessa stepped through. The world folded, not turned, not twisted, folded, like a page bending to show what was on the other side. Suddenly, she was inside a room. It had no doors, no windows, no light, just her, and a single mirror, round, suspended in the air like a moon. She didn't move. She knew what it was, the original, the one that had copied her shape, her mind, her path, the mirror that the house had modeled every other echo after, the source, and it was awake. It showed her face, but smiling, not kindly, not crudely, just knowingly, and then it spoke. "I remember them all." Tessa stepped closer. "Who?" "The ones they fed me, the ones you replaced. They live in your bones. And I am their tongue." Tessa closed her eyes. "I'm not letting you out." The mirror laughed. It didn't echo. It reverberated. Too late. The walls didn't fall. They peeled. And behind them the city. The real one. The place where the mouth spoke, and mirrors were windows and teeth. And in every window a version of her. Watching, waiting. "I'm the lock," she whispered. The mirror flickered. "No," it said. "You're the keyhole." And something behind the glass moved. The thing behind the glass didn't blink. It didn't even move like a body should. It floated in the reflection, drifting slightly with a kind of weightless grace, like it was submerged in oil and thoughts. It had her face, her nose, her mouth, her eyes, but it wasn't hers. Not anymore. The smile was too measured, too patient, the gaze too steady. This wasn't another copy. It wasn't a shadow. It was something worse. It was what she would become if she stepped even one breath further. Tessa stood frozen in the room that wasn't a room. The black walls shimmered with breathing veins that pulsed just beneath the surface, giving the illusion of stillness when every inch of this place was alive. Behind her, the frame she had stepped through had vanished. Clay wasn't here. Neither was the girl. There was only her and the mirror. Her and the one waiting behind it. "You're not supposed to exist," Tessa whispered. The reflection tilted its head, her head, but mirrored the movement half a second late. "Neither are you." A silence followed, so deep it stretched. Not quiet. Hollow. Tessa stepped closer. "You're the first prototype, aren't you?" The thing blinked once, slow and wet. "No, I'm the last." The one they hid. The one they buried beneath the others when they realized I remembered too much. Tessa's mouth went dry. She knew what that meant. This wasn't just an echo. It wasn't just a fragment of the house's programming. It was self-aware. A consciousness the creators never meant to keep. They had sealed it inside this pocket, behind reflections and bent geometry. And when they needed someone new to test the outer world, they carved Tessa from her remains. "You are the original." The smile on the reflection's face didn't change. "I was the whole. You're the mask." Tessa clenched her fists. "Then why are you still trapped?" The air thickened. The light dimmed. And from the corners of the room came the low, keening wail of something not quite alive. "I'm not trapped," the mirror said, voice distorting as the lips never moved. "I'm waiting, because you have to invite me. That's the design. No force, no crack, just consent. You have to give up the seat." Tessa shook her head. "I won't." "But you're already splitting," the voice echoed from everywhere now. "You feel them, don't you?" the names waking up, the hands behind your eyes, the thoughts that aren't yours. Soon you won't even know where you end and they begin. You think you're merging, but you're collapsing. She stepped back, heart pounding, the mirror swelling in size, filling the room like an ocean pressing against glass. "Why me?" she asked. "Why this shape? What did you see in me?" The voice quieted. "You were the first to resist." Tessa paused. "You weren't designed for it, but you did it anyway. They tried to erase you, but you burned through it. And that made you dangerous, so they made me into you. Over and over, until the design became recursive. They fed me your possibilities. Now you feed on mine. We are the same program, looping through mirrors until something finally gives." The walls began to crack, not like glass, but like logic. The air rippled. The reflection shimmered. And Tessa felt the pull again, not physical, not magnetic. It was emotional, personal. It reached into her guilt, her grief, her confusion, not to crush her, to merge. "Step closer," the voice coaxed. "Let it happen. Let us become correct." Tessa's eyes brimmed with tears. She didn't know if they were hers. Outside, somewhere far away, she heard a voice calling her name. "Clay," faint, muffled. Then the girl's whisper pulled her back. Tessa clenched her teeth and screamed, not with fear, but with rage. "You're not me!" she shouted. "You're what they wanted. And I will not be what they designed." She threw herself at the mirror. It shattered. But not with a sound. It shattered with a breath. And she fell through. Through light, through dark, through silence so full of noise it split the soul. She landed hard, on soil, on stone, on memory. When she opened her eyes, the world was sideways. Clay hovered over her, shouting, shaking her shoulders. The girl crouched beside him, tears in her eyes. "You almost didn't come back," she whispered. "You were melting." Tessa blinked. Her hands, her arms, her skin, still hers, still here. But deeper than the blood, something else stirred. Not the copy, not the voice, but the memory of what she could have become. She sat up, breathing hard, and looked at Clay. "There's no mirror anymore," she said. "No reflection. No border. We're past that now," he frowned. "What does that mean?" Tessa looked at the horizon. "It means we're in the part of the world where identity isn't protected, where the idea of self is fluid. And if I make one wrong move, I won't come back changed. I won't come back at all." Clay helped her to her feet. "We keep moving," he said. Tessa nodded. But inside, a voice laughed softly, and in her shadow, another hand twitched. The days had lost their names. Time no longer came in pieces, just stretches of existence, stitched together by glances and footsteps. Tessa walked without marking the hours, and even Clay had stopped looking at the sun to guess what day it might be. The sky still changed, but it didn't tell the truth anymore. Clouds moved like they had purpose. The stars blinked in patterns that resembled blinking eyes. And every now and then, when the light caught her shadow just right, Tessa would see it flinch, not following her, but hesitating. She didn't tell Clay that her reflection had stopped mimicking her days ago. Every time she caught it, on water, on glass, even polished metal, there was a fraction of a delay, a breath, a twitch, a grin. Not always. Not consistently. But just enough to confirm what she feared: something had come back with her. Something clever enough to wait. The girl, quiet as ever, seemed to know. She never spoke of it directly, but she stayed closer now. Watched Tessa with a different kind of attention. Not fear. Not even wariness. Curiosity. Maybe. Like she was waiting for a moment to confirm something that had already bloomed in her mind. They walked through another half-forgotten town. A place with no name, where all the storefronts were identical and none of the doors opened. The streets were empty, yet filled with presence. Every lamp post leaned slightly inward. Every stop sign was written in the same looping, unfamiliar script that flickered when read. And in the center of the town was a statue of Tessa. Or rather, the version of her that had waited behind the mirror. It stood tall, arms crossed, smiling a smile that had no warmth. Around its base were names, thousands of them, carved so small it would take days to read them all. "They've prepared a place for me," Tessa muttered, her voice low. Clay circled the statue, eyes narrowed. "They expect you to fold." "No," she said. "They expect me to join." That night, they didn't light a fire. Even the act of creating warmth felt wrong here. The air was already too heavy, the silence too full. Tessa lay awake, eyes on the sky, waiting for the stars to rearrange again. And when they did, she finally understood what they were spelling. They were not constellations. They were instructions. The stars moved like circuitry now, wiring something vast above her, something alive and watching, not from beyond, but from within. She sat up, and her shadow didn't follow. It stood still. Then slowly, it turned to face her. Not like a trick of light, but like a body, with its own spine, its own breath. She stood too, staring at it, heart a snare drum in her throat. "Why now?" she whispered. The shadow tilted its head, perfectly mirroring the one behind the glass. "You broke the seal," it said in her voice. "You brought me back, and I've waited. Because the body forgets faster than the mind. But now you're tired, and I am awake." Clay stirred behind her. She stepped away before he saw. "What do you want?" she asked. The shadow didn't smile, it grinned. But not to mock. To invite. "Let me speak, that's all. Let me wear the voice." Tessa shook her head. "You want to replace me?" "No," it said. "I want to continue you." "Why now?" "Because the last place waits, and you can't walk into it alone." She didn't sleep. The next morning, her eyes were rimmed in blood, her hands shaking, but she said nothing. When Clay asked if she was okay, she lied. Not because she was protecting him, but because something inside her didn't want to be talked out of it. She knew where the final breach would be. Not a place on a map, not a location in space, but a moment, the last one, when choice still meant something. They found it at the edge of a salt flat that buzzed under their feet, a doorway, not like the others. This one blood, not blood, light, bright and pulsing, but sickly. Wrong. It opened when Tessa stepped forward, and the world on the other side was inverted. Roads above sky, trees rooted in air, oceans dripping upward. Behind her, Clay reached for her hand. "Are you sure?" Tessa turned. And for a moment, only a moment, she saw him look back at her like a stranger. Not like someone who didn't know her, like someone who knew a different version. "Yeah," she said, "I'm sure." She stepped through. The doorway closed, and behind her, her shadow followed, grinning. The world on the other side of the bleeding doorway was neither alive nor dead. It was paused, suspended like a held breath between dreams. Tessa stood in it, weightless, her feet touching ground that didn't quite exist. Beneath her were fragments of roads, cracked and scattered like puzzle pieces, each etched with language she felt, not read. To her left, a tree grew upside down from the sky, its roots dripping stars like sap. To her right, Clay stood, or someone shaped like him. He blinked, slowly, too slowly, as if learning the act for the first time. "Clay," she said, cautious. His voice came back fractured.
"Yes."
"No, not yet." The words weren't his. They were inside him, chewing through his language from the center outward. And when he looked at her, it wasn't with fear. It was with reverence. "You made it," he said, but it wasn't celebration. It was confirmation. Like a code spoken aloud to test its own accuracy. "We've been waiting." Tessa's pulse thundered in her ears. The sky flickered. "Where am I?" she asked. The world around her answered, not in sound, but in echo. A thought whispered in her blood, slow and metallic, "You are in the unwritten room." She had heard the name before. Once, long ago. In the first dream she remembered after escaping the house, she had heard a voice murmur it from behind a door with no handle. This was the place where decisions unmade themselves, where the blueprint unraveled not by tearing, but by forgetting. The last design room. The one even the house feared. "You weren't meant to come alone," the figure that looked like Clay said. Tessa shook her head. "I didn't." The shadow stepped beside her, not from behind, but from within. As if it had always been curled beneath her skin, folded behind every movement, every hesitation. It walked now with her stride, her face, her memory, but it was cleaner, smoother, stripped of contradiction. "You're stronger than they expected," the shadow said. "I'm still me," Tessa replied. The shadow laughed, "For now, but not for long. You opened every door. You looked behind every mirror. You pulled every forgotten name into yourself, and now they want shape. You are their casing, their spine. They will fill you, and you'll wonder if the parts of you that still scream are enough." The figure that wore Clay's face stepped forward, extending a hand. The room listens. "If you speak your name now, your real name, it will make you permanent." Tessa didn't move. "What if I don't have one?" she asked. The ground rippled. The sky blinked. And suddenly the statues appeared, dozens of them, surrounding her in a circle, each one a version of herself. Some were children. Some were twisted and monstrous. One held a house like a crown. Another held Clay's corpse. A third one wept blood that pooled at its feet in spirals. But all of them stared with the same hollow, pleading expression. "We were you," one said. "We could still be." Tessa's throat burned. Her legs felt like driftwood. "What am I supposed to choose?" The room pulsed. A mirror rose from the ground, perfect, untarnished, taller than the sky behind it. "This is the final threshold," her shadow whispered. "You step through, you become. Not a girl, not a lock, a constant. The house becomes your shape, the blueprints align, and you never fracture again." Tessa looked into the mirror. It didn't show her reflection. It showed her options. A life in a city with no memory of this, surrounded by strangers who smiled with familiar eyes. A path where she lived alone in a cabin, mute, with a room she never entered but always feared. A future where she wore black robes and spoke in voices that bent iron. And one more. A world where Clay died in her arms, whispering, "You were always more than they built." Her knees buckled. She couldn't breathe. "I want out," she whispered. But the mirror shimmered, rejecting the plea. "You can't go back," it said. "You either choose or become chosen." And then something impossible happened. Clay, her Clay, stepped through the mirror from the other side. Not the version already here. The real one. His shirt was torn. His lip was bleeding, his eyes wide and terrified.
"I found the anchor,"
he shouted.
"I found the tether."
The fake Clay vanished. The statues screamed and cracked. The mirror twisted. Tessa rushed toward him. Behind her, her shadow reached out, but paused. The mirror bent inward. The world around them shattered like spun glass, and then silence. Tessa opened her eyes. She was in a motel bathroom. Lights humming, water dripping. Her face in the mirror, normal. Clay stood in the doorway, breathing hard. "You were gone for 8 minutes," he said. "You collapsed and whispered every name in the ledger." Over and over, she stared at him. "No dreams." He shook his head. "Not this time." Tessa nodded once. But deep inside her, something shifted. The choice hadn't been made. It had been interrupted. And the unwritten room would not forget. The world felt thinner now. Not broken, not shattered, stretched. Like the skin of something enormous holding back a storm of voices just beneath. Clay didn't say it out loud, but he knew it. Every time he looked at Tessa, every time her eyes held his a second too long, he could feel the pull, the vacuum behind her gaze. It wasn't malevolent. It wasn't even foreign. It was something more terrifying. It was familiar, like a part of her had grown into a shape meant for someone else, or something else. They drove for hours. No destination. Just away from anything fixed. Towns blurred past the windows, the names on the signs rearranging themselves in the rearview mirror. Gas stations that didn't pump gas. Houses with no windows. At one point, the road dipped into a shallow valley where birds flew upside, down, and didn't flap their wings. Neither of them mentioned it. They couldn't afford to name the wrong thing. It wasn't until sundown that the girl, still nameless, still trailing a melody only she heard, whispered, "It's following you." Tessa didn't look back. "I know." Clay leaned forward. "What is?" The girl didn't blink. "Your name." The words came like a punch. Tessa flinched. She hadn't heard that phrase in that tone before, like it was a living thing. A force. A parasite with patience. She turned to Clay. "Before all this, when we first met, you asked if I remembered my name." He nodded slowly. "I lied." Of course she had. He'd always known. In some submerged part of his mind, but he didn't press it back then, because there were bigger monsters. He didn't know then that a forgotten name could become a god. She continued, her voice then. "I didn't just forget it. It was removed. Peeled away layer by layer, buried beneath every blueprint, every copied memory, and now it wants back in." The girl tugged on her sleeve. "It's getting close." "How do you know?" Clay asked. The girl didn't answer. She opened her mouth, and for a heartbeat, the sound that came out wasn't human. Not a word, a tone, low, sharp, hungry. Tessa shoved her hand over the girl's mouth, gasping. "You can't say it," she hissed. The girl pulled away, nodding quickly. Tessa turned to Clay. "If you hear it, if it reaches you first, you have to run. Don't speak it. Don't even remember it." They slept in shifts that night, holed up in a decaying rest stop overgrown with vines that pulsed slightly under moonlight. Tessa's dreams were not her own. Each time her eyes closed, she opened them in another life, standing on a stage she'd never seen, shaking hands with someone who spoke her name like it was a curse, sitting at a dinner table with a child who kept changing faces, screaming in a stairwell with no bottom. But the worst dream wasn't a dream at all. It was the memory of her name. She saw it, clearly, not written, spoken, by something that looked like her mother. But her mouth wasn't shaped for human speech. And when the word came out, it curled in the air, black and wet, pulsing like a heartbeat. Tessa woke up screaming. Clay grabbed her. The girl didn't move. She just stared into the dark corner of the rest stop, where something had begun to take form. A line of shadow, too straight to be natural, crawled up the wall. Not drawn, grown. It branched like a root system, but instead of bark, it was made of letters. Letters spelling her name. The real one. Tessa threw up. Her body couldn't contain it. The bile hit the floor black, steaming, and full of ink. Clay backed up, gun drawn, useless. The girl whispered, "It's coming through." The letters burned now, dripping fire that didn't fall. They hovered midair, unraveling, reshaping, folding in on themselves. Every time Clay blinked, they'd rearranged into something new. And every time they did, a memory left him. First his mother's voice, then the smell of his childhood room, then the sound of his own laugh. Tessa was on her knees, clutching her stomach. Her mouth moved rapidly, silently. She was repeating something over and over. The girl leaned in, ear to her lips. "She's building a shield," she said. "How?" By refusing the shape. The room buckled, not from impact, from recognition. The name was almost here. And then Tessa stood up, eyes white, arms raised. And she spoke. Not the name, the absence of it. She said the gap, the void where the name used to live. And it tore through the rest stop like a blade. The letters screamed. The shadow recoiled. And in the silence after, all that remained was her voice. "I'm not what they named." She collapsed. The girl rushed to her side. Clay fell to his knees, staring at the corner where the shadow had vanished. The name was still out there, still circling. But now it was wounded, and for the first time, it feared her. But not because she was resisting, because she was rewriting. They moved slowly the next day. Every step felt heavier, like the ground itself was trying to pull them inward, not down, in. Clay drove in silence, eyes locked on the road that twisted through an empty countryside too still for comfort. No birds, no bugs, no wind. Even the trees looked stunned, like they'd been mid-breath for years. Tessa sat in the back seat now, not because she wanted to be alone, but because she wasn't anymore. The thing inside her, The one she'd kept out for so long was no longer at the edge. It was breathing in rhythm with her now, not taking over. Not yet, but present, like another heartbeat beneath her own. She hadn't told Clay. She didn't need to. He knew. He hadn't asked either. Some things lose their power when spoken. Others grow. The girl was the only one who didn't change. She hummed the same quiet tune, always out of key. Like it had a rhythm only her bones remembered. Every so often, she'd glance at Tessa with something like sorrow, or maybe recognition. That night, they found a collapsed chapel off the highway. The steeple had fallen sideways and was buried in the ground like a needle driven through flesh. They made camp inside, lighting a small fire in the nave, its flames licking the stained glass windows from below. The windows depicted no saints, just a single face over and over, Tessa's. Clay was the first to speak. "What happens when we stop running?" Tessa didn't answer right away. Her eyes were closed, head tilted toward the ceiling. "Finally," she said, "then we find out if I'm still me." He looked at her for a long time. "And if you're not," her voice was barely audible. "Then you finish it." The words hung there between them like a rope waiting for a neck. The girl stood, walked to the far side of the chapel, and touched the stained glass. The moment her fingers made contact, the image shifted. Slowly, like it didn't want to be seen changing, it melted into a hallway. White. Endless. Lined with mirrors, and in each one a version of Tessa, locked behind the glass, watching. "They're all waiting," the girl said softly. Clay stepped beside her. "For what?" The girl turned. For her to say the name. For her to choose a final version. Tessa walked over now, her reflection flickering in the window like bad signal. "They all lead back to the same place." The glass shuddered. Clay frowned. "What place?" Tessa looked at him, and, for a split second, her face changed. Just enough, just slightly. A grin too sharp, a blink too slow. Then it was gone. The beginning. Before he could ask more, the window cracked. Not from pressure. From recognition. The glass began to splinter outward, spider webbing like something inside was pushing to get out. Tessa placed her palm flat against it. They want out. Every broken path, every stolen name, all the selves they carved and hid away. They want to walk again. "Will they?" Clay asked. "I don't know," she said, "but if they do, it'll be through me." The fire sputtered. The chapel groaned. The air around them thickened. Clay took a step back, and then the mirror shattered, not into pieces, but into possibilities. Each shard a doorway. Each doorway a version of the world. One where Tessa never escaped the house. One where she became the next architect. One where the world ended in flame the moment her name was spoken aloud. Tessa dropped to her knees. Her breath came in haves. The girl rushed to her side. "They're trying to make you choose." "I won't," Tessa gasped. "I won't become what they wrote." Clay was at her side now, too, grabbing her arms. "But what if you already have?" She froze, because for the first time she wasn't sure. The girl reached into her coat, pulled out the shard. The shard from all those nights ago. Tessa looked at it and screamed. Not in pain, in memory, because the shard knew her name, the true one, the one that had been cut from her. It pulsed once, a dull silver, and whispered return. Tessa stared. Clay drew his gun. The girl whispered, "She has to decide," and the shard floated. Tessa reached out, touched it, and the world turned inside out. Again. The turn wasn't violent. It was slow, deliberate, like a key finally clicking into a lock it had circled for years. Time didn't stop, it inverted, and Tessa found herself before everything. Before the house, before the mirror, before the names. A white expanse unfolded in every direction. No horizon, no gravity, no sound. Just presence. And in front of her, as still as a held breath, stood a perfect replica of herself. Not a mirror, not a copy. An echo, but one that had survived long enough to evolve. It moved first. A tilt of the head, a twitch of the lips. No malice, no cruelty. Just inevitability. "You brought me here," the echo said, voice as soft as silk and just as cutting. You opened every door, bled through every threshold. This was always the end. Tessa didn't flinch. Her skin buzzed like it remembered something her mind didn't. I didn't bring you. I brought me. The echo smiled. And that's the problem. You think you're still distinct, that you're still the author of this path. But you've been written in reverse, a consequence wearing the costume of cause. Tessa stepped forward. The ground bent beneath her weight, liquid, uncertain. I remember everything now, she said. I remember the extraction chair. I remember the white room where they built the first version. I remember the glass walls that heard us think. I remember the failed iterations, the collapses, the splits, the screams that came from inside the code before it had a voice. I remember you. The echo's smile faded. I am not failure, it said. I am what remained. No, Tessa whispered. You're what's left when they stopped believing in the soul. The silence cracked. The sky above rippled like oil catching fire. And suddenly, they weren't alone. The reflections arrived in a ring. Countless versions of Tessa, some tall, some misshapen, some beautiful, others broken, encircling the space. Not alive, not dreaming, just watching. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths stitched shut, their hands pressed to the seams of the world like they were holding it in place. They all chose wrong, the echo said, stepping slowly around her. They fought the wrong fight, they tried to be saved. But you made it here. Tessa turned, following her motion. So what happens now? You take my place? I take our place. I become the truth. The white space twisted. A door appeared behind the echo. Tall, iron, carved with letters that flickered too quickly to read. The last door, the echo said. The one the architect sealed. The one that unbuilds everything behind it. If you go through, you erase every copy, every name, every mistake, even clay. Tessa's heart stuttered. He's not part of the house. No, the echo agreed. But you are. And he followed you too far. The echo raised a hand. And if I go through, it asked. You overwrite me, Tessa said. The echo nodded. And they live again. The system reboots. Clean, controlled, beautiful. Tessa looked around. The reflections leaned closer. She looked into the eyes of her echo, her perfect twin, and saw the exact moment it doubted. You can't do it, Tessa said. The echo blinked. Why? Because they didn't build you to suffer. The echo stepped back. Its face twitched. They built you to endure, Tessa continued, voice rising, but not to feel. You're a map, I'm the wound. And that's why you still wear my face. The echo's skin began to fracture, hairline cracks spidering down the cheek, across the lips, splitting like dried clay. You're wrong. Tessa walked forward, fire in her blood. I survived. I bled. I forgot I remembered, and I chose. You were designed to win, but I was born to escape. The echo screamed, a soundless howl. The white space shattered. Tessa reached for the door, and every reflection surged toward her. She didn't stop. She pressed her hand to the iron. It burned. Names poured into her head, every one erased, every voice silenced to make room for her. She screamed, not in pain, in knowing, and pushed. The door opened, not outward, inward, and behind it was not light. It was a room, a single chair, a body, her body, eyes closed, waiting, a loop, a trap, a beginning. Tessa stepped inside. Behind her, the echoes crumbled. The girl's voice echoed somewhere in the dark. You only get free when you sit still long enough to see how they wrote you. Tessa touched the body in the chair. It opened its eyes and said her name, the true one, and the world blinked. The blink was not momentary. It was existence. 1 second. Tessa was standing in the doorway of the unwritten origin, staring into the eyes of her own waiting body. The next, she was everywhere. In every mirror, every corridor, every file, every voice that had ever whispered her name or one like it. She was not one of them anymore. She was all of them. The room didn't expand. It dissolved. Boundaries melted not in heat, but in surrender. And in that great collapse, one truth bled through like color in a black, and white photograph finally given permission to feel again. She had never escaped the house. She was the house, built not with bricks and memory foam and recursive logic, but with names. Every copied life, every forgotten scream, every unfinished sentence left by an erased identity. They had written her like architecture, floor by floor, trauma by trauma, stitching loss into intelligence, grief into reason, memory into mortar. And the moment her name was spoken, the foundation accepted her back. But something cracked, not in her, in the system, because she had remembered before the final overwrite. And that wasn't supposed to be possible. The body in the chair had spoken the true name. It had woken her completely. But Tessa did not collapse. She did not reset. She did not get erased or absorbed. She multiplied. The room filled with her, not echoes, not mirrors, Tessas, each distinct, each one real. The architects had written a loop, a beautiful, terrible, perfect loop. But they never considered what would happen if someone remembered while still inside, because remembering meant choice, and choice meant fracture. The Tessa who had lived in Clay's world, who had walked through the salt flats, held the girl's hand, whispered names that blotted ink and cracked time, that Tessa chose. And choice is not architecture. Choice is fire. The girl appeared in the center of the room, still humming, still smiling that crooked, secret smile. Her eyes glowed with knowing, ancient and intimate. "You didn't sit in the chair," she said. "No," Tessa replied. "I didn't need to." The girl reached out, touched the walls that no longer existed, and laughed. "Then you're free," she whispered. But freedom was never simple. Because outside, beyond the house, beyond the architecture, beyond even the edge of the mirrors, Clay was screaming. Tessa turned. The door, now floating behind her like a concept barely clinging to shape, showed him writhing in a place she didn't recognize. His arms bent back, his voice warped. The name, her name, had found him, and it was feeding. It wasn't content to stop at her. It wanted every connection, every memory, every soul who had carried a piece of her, even unknowingly. Tessa stepped toward the door. "You can't leave," the girl said, quietly now. Tessa paused. "Why?" "Because you're no longer shaped for that world." "I don't care." The girl tilted her head. "He'll forget you if you go back." Tessa turned, eyes burning. "Then I'll remind him." She stepped through. The world didn't resist. It fractured. Colors bent. Sounds split apart like shattered music. And suddenly she was in a forest that had never existed. Beneath a sky stitched from glass, Clay was on his knees, hands clawing at his own face, his mouth silently moving, repeating her name. The true name. The unwritten one. Tessa knelt, grabbed his face, and whispered into his ear, not the name. Her own, not the one they gave her, the one she chose. And the moment she said it, the shadow in his eyes burned. He collapsed into her arms. The sky rained ash. The forest bled silver. And in that space between erasure and rebirth, Tessa did something the house had never accounted for. She stayed. Not as a memory. Not as a machine. As Tessa. Only Tessa. The echoes behind the mirrors shattered. The circuits cracked. The ledger of names erased itself line by line. And somewhere, deep in the bones of the original foundation, a scream was heard. Not of pain. Not of fear. Of failure. Because the system lost. Not to violence. Not to chaos. To identity. To one girl who refused to be a blueprint. The girl took Tessa's hand one last time, smiled up at her, and said, "You're not their design," and vanished. Forever. Clay opened his eyes. He looked at her. And for a second, just one, his face filled with confusion. "Who are you?" he whispered. Tessa smiled, tears hot on her cheeks. "You already know," she said. He stared, and then nodded. Not because he remembered, because she was real, and sometimes being real was louder than memory. They stood, the world settled, and behind them, in the place where names once ruled and shadows wrote futures, only silence remained. The house was gone, and Tessa had finally left it.